I started on my mission, I've been out about 2 days, and we had a meeting. It was with that Albert Dow guy, you know, and they asked me to lead the song. And there was just a group about half this size. There was Albert Dow, and Mom knows Albert Dow, and a couple of others. And I got to pick the song, so I chose "The Spirit of God as the Fire is Burning," and my job was to lead it. The thing I didn't realize is they were all non-members. They had no idea what that song was. So I got up there and started to sing, and I realized all of a sudden I was doing a solo. I wasn't exactly a great singer in my life. And I just closed my eyes and sang, you know. Anyway. Okay.
Albert Dow, Dad baptized him, and he came and looked us up and had dinner with us at Sundance on his way to a mission in Romania, wasn't it? Or somewhere.
Wait, it's not the guy that lives in Maryland?
He lives in
That knows the
New England.
Goslings?
He knows the Gos
The
When we
Maine
met?
in Maine. And his kids have all gone on missions, and it's been he's been like a bishop and everything. Now he's on a mission, and Dad baptized him.
Some of the topics we're going to cover is we're going to talk about the wars that are going to happen in the last days. And there's 2 series of wars. There's wars called preparatory wars, which are like the Second World War, Second World War, those kinds of things. These are wars with rules and humanity. And every time a war is fought, the gospel is opened up. And Orson Pratt made a prophecy. He said that the Lord will cause wars to happen, and countries will be defeated that are not favorable to the gospel, and the gospel will come in. And Harold B. Lee, after the Second World War, said he saw utter fulfillment of that prophecy when Japan, who didn't let any missionaries go in, and after the war they now are very, very large. He says that was an utter fulfillment of that prophecy. The first wars are called preparatory wars. The second wars are called wars of utter destruction, where there'll be no mercy. They'll come in, there'll be no lives spared, it'll be totally ruthless, kill the women, kill the children, no quarter taken, okay? The second thing we're going to talk about is return of the is the gathering of Israel. And this is a very important thing. One of the articles of faith talk about that. The gathering of Israel involves basically a couple of things. First of all, it's going to result in the saints going back to Jackson County, Missouri, which I think could happen in your lifetime. One time I thought it'd be my lifetime, but I don't think it's going to happen. And when they go back, there's going to be 200,000 or 300,000 people going back to Jackson County, Missouri. They're going to walk back. They're going to have all the hardships. There's going to be a man raised up like unto Moses to lead them back to Jackson County, Missouri. When they get back there, it's going to be totally desolate, and they'll take possession of it, and it'll be a place that's so fabulous that wickedness will not enter in. You cannot go back on your own. You have to kind of get a recommend to go back. The second part of it, and we'll talk about that.
So like a prophet being raised up? Or just a person?
They say a man's going to be raised up like unto Moses.
So would it be like the prophet of the church you're thinking? Or?
I don't know if it's going to be a
Like
prophet
unto
of the church
Moses,
or not,
like
to be
his
honest with you.
situation, or like unto Moses,
Well-
like unto Moses,
To lead
like
them.
Like Brigham Young, like a new
He's
Brigham
Like
gonna
a
Young.
Brigham Young, but like, I mean, so he'll be the prophet
When
of the
the
church?
people
or-
go back to Jackson County, there will literally, God will go with them. There'll be a pillar of fire in the day, and there'll be a pillar of fire at night, and a cloud in the day, and the Lord will go with them. And they'll walk back. They won't have cars. Ezra Taft Benson said this because there's no gas. And they'll go back, they'll commence building, and then once they commence building, the Lamanites will come in mass. Right now, the conversion of the Lamanites is very small, as you know. Once Jackson County begins to be built, the Lamanite conversion will be massive.
why?
Well, because the gospel will be taken to the Lamanites, and all the
It's a prophecy too, isn't
But
it?
all
not
the prophecies
necessarily
in
because
Third
Jackson's
Nephi,
being built.
are going to come to fruition at that time. At the same, and after, and I'm just giving you a summary right now.
That's
Okay,
fine.
we'll go into these in detail. And then after they start building Jackson County, Missouri, they'll be living the United Order there. There'll be an enormous earthquake, the biggest earthquake the world has ever known. And this is when the 10 tribes out of the north will come, the 10 lost tribes. There'll be an earthquake of just devastating proportions. And then the 10 tribes will come down, and they'll come directly to Jackson County, Missouri, okay? Now, most of the members of the church will not go back there. Most of them will stay here in Salt Lake City.
Where's
okay?
the earthquake going to be?
The second
The
part.
whole earth?
I'm
The
sorry?
whole earth is going to quake?
What about the earthquake?
The whole earth is going
Where
to be
will
an
the
Well, I
earthquake?
think the whole earth will fill it, yeah. But the earthquake will open up the north, and a highway will be cast out, and they'll come down. And their prophets are preparing them now to come.
So those who go back will only be men, or will be like, so say
Be
Sarah,
feminine.
say Jake goes, would
Nope.
Sarah go with Jake?
Yeah, and women and children will go. Women and
Go
children
without
will
me.
go. They'll establish it. And when we're going to talk a lot about New Jerusalem. because it's going to be a fabulous place. Christ will be there. You go to the temple, you'll see him. He's going to come into your home. Joseph Smith's going to be there. Brigham Young's going to be there. It's going to be great.
Where?
Yeah, and then at the New Jerusalem,
Missouri?
New Jerusalem.
Jackson County,
Joseph
Missouri.
Smith will be
Okay.
there?
The second part of the gathering is going to be the Jews returning to Palestine. The Jews aren't going to come to Jackson County. That's going to be the lost. It's going to be the other. It's going to be basically Joseph and the other lost 10 tribes. And what will happen is there's going to be a lot of internal conflict in this country, and it's going to get so bad worldwide that the Jews, even though they want to stay, will be forced to go to Palestine, and they will flee there in mass.
From here to there.
Pardon?
From here to there.
They'll go from every country in the world.
From all over the world.
Like now, there are
How
more
are they gonna
Jews
do
in
that
New
if
York.
there's not
There are
gas?
more Jews in New York City than there are in
Oh.
Palestine right now.
Well, it's already happening, kind of, isn't it?
Yeah.
Old
And
and
anyway, they'll return to Jerusalem,
Oh,
and they will bring tons of money.
That's happening right now, actually. That's Zionism.
It's happening now, but it's a piddle. It's a piddle right now.
But
But you can see it moving.
But I thought they
I
were
mean,
trying
all
to
the
kick
Jews.
Jews out of Palestine. So
Pardon?
why would they go back to Palestine?
Who's kicking them
There
out?
is no Palestine.
Aren't
Palestine
they?
is.
Who?
Isn't there like a lot of problems right there? Trying to get rid of the
They're not
Jews?
kicking them
Yeah,
out.
there are a lot of problems.
But I mean, they're still there, though.
They go back to
They don't
Jerusalem.
like them.
Like Palestine's a
The
newer state.
Palestinians
Like,
don't like
used
the
to-
Jews.
Used to be Israel.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk more about that. And then there's going to be and after this happens, then there's right before this happens, there's going to be incredible internal strife in America. So much so that literally the government will have no power.
Thank you, Obama. I'm just
I
saying.
would believe,
Yeah.
I would be surprised if he has
So
a
I should
hand
just
in that.
Obama bash.
And there'll be state against state, family against family, and the only place, and there'll be no crops raised because farmers can't stay there to raise them. The only place there'll be peace is here in the valleys, and people will come here by the hundreds of thousands to the valleys of here because of the peace and the security, okay?
But will they come to
Their
try and
property
take
value.
it, or will they come
They'll
to try
come
and be
because they don't
part
want
of
to take
it?
up arms to defend themselves. They're gonna come here and live here because there's peace and because there's law and order. And there'll be a government set up called the Kingdom of God, which is called the
50, right?
Council of 50, which was a political government established by Joseph Smith. Be a council of 50 men,
I read about it. The
Yeah.
Doctrine and Covenants last week.
that will establish a government,
So I was reading.
and there will be non-members on this as well as members. And
They
it'll
just have to be a
That's in
it'll separate
Utah?
from the-
That's only.
That's in Utah.
Yeah, in Utah.
That's only a political thing,
It's a
right?
political
It's
thing,
not
yeah.
a religious. Like,
It's not a religious
Council.
thing, it's a political thing. Okay, and then we'll talk about Armageddon, which is one of the greatest battles the world's ever known. We will talk about Christ is going to appear in, we'll kind of put these in order, is going to appear in the New Jerusalem, Jackson County at the temple. It'll appear there. He's also going to appear in Adam-on-Diamond, and in that council there'll be 100 million people at that council of Adam-on-Diamond, and hopefully some of us will be there. And Joseph Smith will be there, Adam will be there, he'll preside, Adam will preside, and everybody who's ever had keys will give them to Adam, then Adam will give them to Christ, and Christ will take control. And then we're going to talk about the millennium, we're going to talk about the heathens. The heathens will lose their power to control, but I'm not doing these in orders. But the heathens will, okay, let's get the heathens for a second. Okay, the Christian nations of the world, particularly in Europe, will totally collapse. And the key there is when the missionaries are called home. And when the missionaries come, it's getting close. When the missionaries are called out of England, or out of Europe, then Europe will have incredible warfare, savagery, they will collapse. Christendom will collapse.
Do you think, will the saints be called out of there as well? Will they come to Zion like they did?
It
back in
says
the
here
day?
the saints will a lot of the saints will stay there.
I'll bet that they've
But
gathered just for
they'll have
safety.
a lot of hardship. And the trouble is, in the last days, the waters are going to be unsafe to go on.
Yeah.
And you are not going to want to go. The devil is going to literally be on the waters. Brigham Young, Joseph Smith saw the devil on the waters. He will have control over the waters. And you're not going to want to go on the
I
ocean.
can imagine in Europe because that Gulf Stream keeps Europe completely warm. So if that were somehow shifted, I don't know how that could happen. Europe would become like the Ice Age.
What's happened is when the
Yeah,
missionaries are
sure.
called home, the Spirit of God will be withdrawn from Europe, and then they're just gonna
That doesn't seem
collapse.
right. Let's not get into that now, but they have temples there and good saints there. How can that be that it'll be totally withdrawn? But
Well, it doesn't have
well,
the promise.
it won't be
that
the-
the promised land does.
Won't be the
Yeah,
first
that's
time
true.
the
It
temple's
doesn't
been
have
left
the-
abandoned, though.
that's true.
Like not there.
That's
Yeah.
good
Well,
pattern.
can you go to the beginning and start? Because I think
That was a whole
I will, I'll
bunch.
give an overview of everything,
Okay,
and then we're gonna
but-
start.
Okay.
But these are the things we're gonna talk about.
know.
We're gonna talk
We're all
about.
gonna have
mission-
nightmares.
we're gonna
I
bring up-
know.
Maybe we should have
Missionary
started
work.
this earlier.
Right now, we're in what they call a time of the Gentiles, which means the missionary work is going to the Gentiles, it's not going to the house of Israel. And that's us. And right now, and then the time will come when we've gone to the Gentiles, and the Jews aren't gonna take us, are gonna accept us, the heathens aren't gonna accept us, and when the time of the Gentiles is finished, the Lord's going to say, I preached to you, and those who are going to accept it have accepted it. And then He's going to preach a sermon of fire and tornadoes and plagues and diseases like AIDS and that kind of thing, and literally destroy a third of all the people on the face of the earth. And then we're going to talk about, obviously this is more than 1 hour tonight, okay? Then we're going to talk about the heathen nation. The heathen nations are going to lose power to govern, but they will not. But they're going to be more righteous than the Christian nations, mainly because the Christian nations have been given more knowledge, light knowledge, than the heathen nations have.
Who are the heathen nations?
Pardon?
Who are the-
Heathens would be the Muslims and those people like that. Okay, non-Christians. Okay,
The Chinese.
Like, not the
Okay.
Western world.
but they will not be destroyed. But they will not have any power. Okay, but they'll still have the identity. And after the Battle of Armageddon, then the missionary work will go to the heathen nations. It'll be the last group of people where the missionaries go to, okay? And then it'll be very, very quick, and after they go to the heathen nations, then the second coming will happen. So Christ is going to appear. He's already appeared in Kirtland. He's already appeared to Joseph Smith. He's going to also appear in the New Jerusalem. He's going to appear at Diamond. Oh, and then in Jerusalem, the Jews are going to come there in mass, and with money, but there's going to be just terrible, terrible wars, beginning with the Battle of Armageddon, which it'll take them 7 years to clean up the dead, to bury the dead bodies. It's just going to be terrible. 7 years to wait a minute. There's also a battle called the Battle of Gog and Magog, but the Battle of Gog and Magog is going to happen after the millennium. And it'll be bigger, but we're not going to see that. But the Battle of Armageddon, yeah, you could see it. And Palestine, Jerusalem is going to be, one half is going to be conquered, you know, and the other half is on the verge of falling. Then the Christ, and you all know this story, is going to appear at the Mount of Olives, and it's going to open up. When the Jews flee to Palestine or to Jerusalem, some will be converted to the gospel, some will be converted to the gospel when they're there, but the vast majority of the Jews will still not be converted to the gospel. But when Jerusalem is half destroyed, and when the rest of Jerusalem is on the verge of being destroyed, then Christ will appear at the Mount of Olives, and the mount will separate. You all know the story. And then Christ will appear to them, and the people will say, "Who are you?" And he'll show them his hands, and then they'll realize in mass, the Jews, that they had murdered their Savior, and He was the Savior, and then they will join in mass, and they will flee into the valley and be protected. We'll talk about then the conversion of the heathens, and then we'll talk about the millennium. Then we'll talk about the Battle of Gog and Magog. We'll talk about the various resurrections. The first resurrection's going to come right before Christ comes, and hopefully we'll all be in that one. But the major one will be at the end of the millennium. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about.
So if World War II was a preparatory war, wasn't that? I mean, the Nazis didn't have rules. I mean, they
had some rules. I mean, they had prisoners of war, and they had.
I guess
they had some
for the
rules,
most part,
you know.
okay.
More than what we're going to
Unless you were a Jew, then they didn't have rules. But you know, at least they fed the Jews. Okay, let's start. So let's start with wars. Okay.
I've seen those concentration camp pictures.
Now,
Starved them.
I'm going to read some very disturbing stuff to you.
Good.
Yeah.
Tyler.
Oh,
But the thing you need to know is this: is that your children are the best that ever was, and they're coming down here at this time for a reason. The Lord has said that the Mormon people will, by and large, avoid this. They'll be aware of what's going on, but by and large, they will bypass it.
Really?
To me, it's yeah.
Zion.
Yeah,
Like
they did
the
look at
Civil War.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a good example of Civil War. The Mormons were driven out in 1847, 1846.
Well, and then back up, they were in the state that would have had the most destruction in Missouri.
Yeah.
and the Missouriites were the ones that were hit the
They
worst.
were hit the worst, but they were
Well,
out.
Brigham Young and a lot of the people cursed Missouri.
Yeah, that's
And in the temple, they actually went into the temple and they had a ceremony of cursing, which is,
Really?
we don't talk about it very much, but they cursed and literally made
Wait, do they
prophecies.
still do this?
All the time.
And they made prophecies of what was going to happen to the people that had persecuted the Mormons. Anyway, the Mormons went west, which turned out to be a blessing because the Civil War started in 1861. It was a terrible war, and the Mormons really missed the whole war. They were aware of it, but like we'll be aware of it, but they were protected. They weren't in it because they were driven out of the country. The state that was hit hardest was Missouri. And there was a group of raiders called Quantrell Raiders who came into Missouri, and they were so ruthless, they just did terrible things. And the people that got hit the hardest were the people that had persecuted the Mormons. Okay, just let us
I never heard that before.
That's awesome.
I kind of heard that,
I've
but
heard it before
that's
a little
interesting
bit,
though.
but, yeah. So where are they from? The Quantrell Raiders? Where?
Quantrell Raiders. They were
Where were they
There were
from?
people like these drug runners in Mexico. They were
Oh,
just,
really? They're from
they
like,
just came in and
outlaws.
they just
Devastated.
killed people
Just
and
looted
raped
and
women and
raped and
murdered and
pillaged.
plundered, and it was pretty
Good
bad.
accent.
Okay, all right, now let's start off with, first of all, a lot of my stuff. You can see I've got a lot of stuff on this. I've given a lot of talks on the last days, and so I've got a lot of notes here. But my favorite book is Prophecy: Key to the Future. I highly recommend it. I promise you'll find it absolutely intriguing. As you can see, if you look at mine, and Tyler, do not try to sell this.
I got one. Yeah, myself.
These are going for what, about $50 on eBay, but every page is just loaded with yellow marks. You can't see, but about a third of the book is yellowed with little notes on the side, AIDS, starred. You're gonna like this book. I've read it twice, and I think all the other books that are written on the last days probably use this book as a primer.
Who's the author of that?
Dwayne Crowther, who was a seminary teacher, became very, very popular after this happened. Okay. Let's talk wars for a second. Okay, let's start off with the bang.
What's a bang?
Oh, you'll see.
Sarah.
Buckle up, sir.
A bang. Start out with bang.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were joking.
Sorry.
Okay, this is a quote here by Orson Pratt. He says, at the present time there are some nations who will not permit any religion to be proclaimed within their borders, except that it be established by law. When God shall cast down thrones, which he will do soon, when he shall overturn kingdoms and empires, which time is very near at hand, then other governments will be formed more favorable to religious liberty, and the missionaries of the church will visit there. That prophecy was given in the late 1800s, and I'm skipping a lot of stuff here, but Harold B. Lee in General Conference in 1954 said this: subjugation means conquering by force. I want to say to you that one of the most significant things that I have seen in the Far East is the fulfillment of what Elder Parley P. Pratt and Orson Pratt testified would be one of the significant developments necessary to the consummation of God's purposes, the subjugation of Japan and the triumph of constitutional liberty. After World War II, Japan was opened up, okay, and they did great things, okay. There's going to be two wars. There's going to be a preparatory war, which is going on right now, and these are wars with rules, with a little bit of compassion. And then there'll be wars of total destruction.
Those are going on too right now.
On preparatory wars, many times nations were better off after the war was over with. On the wars of terrible destruction, the world will not be better after they happen, okay? Skipping a lot of stuff.
So will they be fighting hand-to-hand combat in these wars because there's no gas, and is that just kind of what they're referring to, or?
Okay, this is a quote by Joseph Smith. He quoted this 8 days before he was martyred. He said, "There will be two great political parties in this country. One will be called the Republicans and one will be called the Democrats."
Those don't
These-
exist back then?
Joseph Smith said this 8 days before he
I
was
know,
martyred.
but the Republicans and
No, it's like
Democrats
the
don't
Whigs.
exist.
It's the Whigs and the.
It
I
was-
think they existed, but they weren't the most prominent.
No, there's
Interesting.
Republicans.
They didn't exist.
There will be two
Democrats
great,
existed.
there will be
I
two
knew the
great
Democrats.
political parties in this country. One will be called the Republicans, the other will be called the Democrats. These two parties will go to war. And out of these two parties will spring forth another party, which will be the independent American party. The United States will spend her strength and means warring in foreign lands. Are we doing that now?
Yeah.
Are we spending just tons of money in Iraq and all over the world? America will spend her means in warring in foreign countries until other nations will say, let's divide up the lands of the United States. Then the people of the United States will unite and swear by the blood of their forefathers that the land shall not be divided. Then the country will go to war, and they will fight until one half of the U.S. Army will give up and the rest will continue to struggle. They will keep on until they are very ragged and discouraged and almost ready to quit. When the boys from the mountains, that's us, will rush forth in time to save the American army from defeat and ruin. And they will say, brethren, we are glad you have come. Give us men. Henceforth you can talk with God. Okay?
Stupid Obama.
Did that say that there would be two parties and that an independent party will rise?
Spring up, yeah.
After the two parties
The
go to war.
people. That's
That's
pretty
It
happening.
happened too. You can see that
So
right
that
now.
means
Those two,
happening.
the Democrats and
There-
Republicans.
There's a big push right now for
It's
a
huge.
liberty, like
There
an
is.
independent libertarian.
Yeah, it's kind of a.
This is interesting here. Orson Pratt made a prophecy about Russia. He said, even in Russia, the gospel will go. And of course, at that time, nobody could go. But now, we're in Russia. That's been fulfilled. Okay? The purpose of these preparatory wars are to overthrow despotic governments which prohibit the teaching of the gospel. Mom saw this in Africa. There wasn't that.
Oh, yeah.
That story really
Most
quick.
popular president in Africa that President Hinckley went and met with, and they broke ground for the temple. His wife was anti-Mormon and didn't want the temple built, and put a lot of pressure on the cabinet and the government to stop the building of the temple in Accra. And lo and behold, that prime minister or president was defeated in the next election, totally stunned everybody because he was so popular. Well, we kind of know why. They had to remove him to get the temple to go forward.
Wow.
And that happens. All the little things like that all over the world are happening. The way is being opened.
Silly wife. Why isn't that happening to Obama's wife?
Well, you remember that the story about Ireland from Sunday school a few weeks
Yeah,
ago?
yeah.
What was that like? Like as soon as they there
State.
wasn't a stake there forever, and the people really wanted one, but there weren't a lot of priesthood holders
Right.
in the area. But they prayed and they prayed and they finally went ahead with it. And as soon as and up to that point, Ireland was like one of the poorest countries in Europe. As soon as the stake went in about 10, 15 years ago, what the outsiders now refer to as the Celtic Tiger, which means the economy of Ireland just went off the charts. We trace it back to the stake being created, and ever since then they've become one of the strongest economies in Europe. So,
They should build another one.
yeah.
Is there a temple in Ireland?
This book was written. I read this book. I read this book. What I used to do when I got books, I put my name in them and I put the date. This is 1966. I didn't know you then, did I?
An old book.
Yeah, so that's when I read this. But it's interesting, they talk a lot about Russia being destroyed, and the gospel going into Russia. Well, back in those days, that was unthinkable.
Yeah, it's
Now
called
look
war.
at it. Now it's
Yeah, I think World War II was like the prime example of this because World War II changed the Iron Curtain came down, and that was definitely a preparatory war.
Okay, Melvin J. Ballard said this, he's talking about Russia. This was back in 1930, and this was after the revolution in Russia. He said, I don't want to read everything, I'm just going to read the highlights. It may seem appalling to us, but it is God breaking up and destroying. Okay, he made a comment that communism, as appalling and wicked as it is actually God breaking up Russia. That godless communism, because it was so, of all the Christian nations, it was the most staunch. It was the most inhospitable.
Impenetrable.
And what he's saying is the Lord brought communists in there, Marxism in there, to literally break down the Russian government, break down the old way. This was in 1930 when he said this, okay? And he said, God breaking up and destroying the older order of things in the process will be the accommodation of God's purposes within a very short period of time. But that people will come back, and I bear testimony to you that there are thousands of the blood of Israel in the land of Russia. God is preparing the way for them, okay? Now,
So do you think that's happening in China right now? 'Cause China's very communist.
They're heathens.
well, could be,
Probably been
could be, could be.
Because they had to break down the Hindu, break down all those other
There are
religions.
so many religions over
Yeah.
there.
Okay. And it says here that the fulfillment of Russia will happen before the internal problems in America. Okay, now, we're in right now a period of time called the times of the Gentiles, which means the gospel is going to the Gentiles right now. Okay?
And the Gentiles are,
Christians who are not Mormons. Okay, let's define this for Sarah. Okay, we're the only people in the world that say Christians. Everyone else thinks Gentiles are non-Christians. Mormons say that if you're of the house of Israel, Gentiles are Christians who are not Mormons. We're the only people in the
If
world
you're
with
not
that definition.
Mormon, you're a Gentile.
Heathens are people that are not Christians. So right now the gospel is basically
Yeah, believe in
going
Christ.
to Christian nations. Okay? Now the time will come when God will say,
Or the
Christian
China.
when the times of the Gentiles, it's the times of the Gentiles right now. The time will come when it's the Gentiles will be fulfilled. Okay, the Gentiles, because of wickedness, will have the missionaries taken from them. The time of the fulfillment of the times of the Gentiles is a time when God's judgments of plagues, famines, pestilence, earthquakes, tidal waves will sweep the wicked off the earth and greatly increase violence. The converts and members of the church living in other countries will be called out and instructed to come to Zion in America. That's the answer to your question.
Makes
when
sense.
the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled.
Get out of there.
Okay?
You know?
Okay?
So
So-
people from Europe will be told to come here.
The LDS people,
The
right.
LDS.
There'll be a
But
huge
Well,
gathering.
they've said that you should go out to your like the stakes, but it says that I think one of the things is like in the last days they'll come back into like the main, like the Mecca.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people, though. I mean, this isn't like 1830 where there was just a...
The key
That's
to
why
that
we're buying land in
is the
Goshen.
missionaries being called home from Europe. So keep your eye on that. Once the missionaries called home, we're not
It's like
going
a
over there.
CNN.
We're not going over there anymore.
More missionaries.
Okay.
Get it out of your system while you still can,
Very
Sarah.
interesting.
All right, that's the key.
And I've seen Europe.
Yeah.
Been there, done
At that time,
What
there will
doesn't
be an
happen when you
internal
guys are
war
over
raging within the United States that will bring about the collapse of national and state government.
wait, back up.
That's terrible.
At that time, when the missionaries are called home,
There'll also be an eternal war in the United States.
internal war.
War in the United States. It'll be state against state, city against
I'm
city.
predicting that already.
Yeah, me too.
I know you
We've
are.
got 12 states that have signed bills to secede from the Union.
What?
There's a
Alright,
major.
And Utah's right on the edge.
Yeah.
It's very
We're looking at
polarized.
Montana, Utah, and Texas to lead the charge.
It's very
well,
polarized
I think they should.
right now.
I'm
So
not
it's very
Texas.
polarized.
This country's more polarized now than it's ever been probably since the Civil War.
I'm a Texan at
You know,
heart.
and there could be a civil war for
So,
red and blue.
okay.
Well, I'm not gonna go beat up my liberal friends. I'm sorry.
Okay?
Not like that, but
I don't think they're gonna come.
The
beat me up.
internal war will
might.
start in America before we go back to the New Jerusalem, where we're still basically here. The internal war is probably going to desolate
the East.
Jackson County, Missouri, okay? And it's going to desolate the whole country except where we live.
Not leaving Browntown.
A world war of terrible destruction will be fought, which will lay waste to the Gentile worlds, lay waste to Europe. But the heathen nations will not be hurt. They won't have power to hurt us like they are now. They'll have their identity, but they will not have power to
Who's
govern,
saying
okay?
this? Who are we recording here?
Now this is the part I want you all to hear.
Who's saying this?
The saints will be, for the most part, escape the impact of this war.
Who's saying that?
Okay, Orson Pratt primarily.
Orson Pratt, okay, that's good.
So wait, tell me what he said again.
Melvin J. Bowder said it.
That's the internal wars will happen before we go back to New Jerusalem,
Yeah, yeah.
and that the wars will
And
primarily
the New
desolate
Jerusalem's
and
in
wipe clean all those areas, preparing a way, and we'll be largely escape
Protected.
that because
So
we'll be
why-
out of it.
Why
Well,
only?
Once it
Gentile
dust
nations?
settles, we go in.
Why not heathen
Clear it off.
nations? Why are they totally free of this?
They have their own
It
little...
would seem
Not
that
their
there's
time
two
yet.
sets of wars. There's the internal war in the U.S. and there's wars outside in Gentile
International
nations.
wars.
Well, there's gonna. I mean,
Well,
we're not gonna be able to fight every single war that's
Well,
out there.
I mean,
We're
look
not.
at, well, I
We're
mean,
gonna have to.
look at Mexico. It's already like that may or may not be part of this, but as of right now, Mexico's just a disaster. It's completely out of control.
It's out of control.
And so you may not call that a war, but I wouldn't go to Mexico right now. Talk about internal strife, and that's going to happen in more and more countries. They're going to lose
happened
their.
like so quickly too. It's
Right now,
not
there's
a matter
control and
of where-
order and governments.
Like 5
That's going to
years.
break
We're
down.
just in Cabo. I wouldn't go back to Cabo right now.
No way.
Rosarito.
Well, Rosarito, we were there a year and a half ago.
Oh, it's gone.
Like
it's gone
3 or
back.
4 years ago, I would have taken Eli and Sophie there, but
Oh, yeah.
right now, are you kidding me? No way.
No, me neither.
I would not take our kids to Mexico or even myself right now.
I wouldn't even
So-
want to be in the border cities like San Diego
No.
Yeah.
and Tucson and
Arizona, yeah.
some of those places, and El Paso.
But it makes you wonder because Utah, if you look at the geography, And a drive to California will illustrate this. You go for long stretches where it's just nothing.
And you can't walk
Same way
across
going
that,
to
yeah,
Colorado, going to Nevada, even through Idaho. It's almost like we're in a little island. It's, if you cut off roads and cut off transportation and there was no air flights, it'd be really hard to get here. And so you could see how we'd be insulated a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, let me give you some quotes now. Ready? You ready for the hard stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, this is, okay, so basically we're talking about
That's not
missionary
the hard
work going to
stuff.
the Gentile nations, okay?
What, Dad?
That's happening, we're talking about missionary work going to the Gentile nations, that's happening right now, okay? When the time comes that the missionaries are called home, that work will stop. The missionary work to the Gentile nations will no longer happen. How will they hear the gospel? The Book of Mormons were left behind. The Book of Mormons are going to be left behind by the thousands, by the hundreds of thousands. People will read them, and there will be a massive work done via the Book of Mormon. I can make sense of that. We will come home, and then we're going to have problems in America. Okay, now ready? You're not going to hold on to Sarah, Jake, because she's not going to like this. Okay, Orson Pratt. Okay. What about the American nation? That war that destroyed the life of some 15 or 1,600,000 people, the Civil War, was nothing compared to that which will eventually devastate this country. It will be a war of neighbor against neighbor, city against city, devastating the country. It will be a war of town against town, county against county, state against state. There will be too much bloodshed, too much mobocracy, too much going forth in bands and destroying and pillaging the land to suffer people to pursue any local vocation and any degree of safety. What will become of the farmer of the land? They will leave their farms and they will remain uncultivated, and they will flee from the ravaging armies from place to place, and this they will go forth burning and pillaging the whole country. And that great and powerful nation, U.S., now consisted of some 40 million people, of course that was then, would be wasted away unless they repent. Have they repented?
No.
I don't know. This is Brigham Young saying, I heard Joseph Smith say that they shall have mobbing to their heart's content if they do not redress the wrongs of the Latter-day Saint people. Mobs will not decrease, they will increase until the whole country becomes a mob. And those who will not take up a sword against their neighbor will have to flee to Zion, where we are. Hold on to your real estate, guys. Okay, Joseph Smith said this. I prophesy in the name of the Lord God of Israel. That carries a lot of weight to me. Joseph Smith saying that. I prophesy in the name of the Lord God of Israel, unless the United States redresses the wrongs committed upon the states upon the saints in the state of Missouri, and punish the crimes committed by her officers, that in a few years that government will be utterly overthrown and wasted, and there will be not so much as a potsherd left.
But they did.
Whatever
They
a
did,
potsherd
didn't
They
is.
did say
Did they
sorry.
repent? I mean, not repent.
They
Did they
didn't
say
really.
sorry? No.
Okay.
They took the extermination of our order off.
Let
Yeah.
me go
But
just,
the actual officers were.
let me go just a little.
About
Let
5
me go
years
just a
ago, I
little
have it on
farther,
my
then
journal.
we'll.
It was after I was born. It was 76.
Okay, let me go just a little
Mine
farther.
was
Yeah,
4.
it was just a couple of years ago.
It was
They
not-
Okay,
apologized.
stop. Let me go just a
Formal
little farther, then we'll talk.
apology.
Okay.
That's
Moses Thatcher.
very different.
Moses Thatcher was a brilliant man, early apostle. He said this in June 16th, 1882 in Franklin County, which is present Idaho. I have seen the end of this nation, and it's terrible. I will tell you in the name of the Lord that a secret band will sap the life from this nation. That sounds just like the Lamanites and the Jaredites.
Or
Wilford
Obama.
Woodruff said this in August 22nd, 1863 in Logan, Utah. And while you stand, he was in the temple at the time, he said, while you stand in the towers of the temple and your eyes survey this glorious valley filled with city and villages occupied by tens of thousands of Latter-day Saints, then you will call to mind this visitation of President Young and company. You will say, that was the day when President Benson and President Mond presided over us. That was before New York was destroyed by earthquakes. It was before Boston was swept into the sea, by the sea heaving beyond its bounds. That was the day before Albany was destroyed by fire. Orson Hyde said, a time is coming when the great and populous city of New York, the greatest city of the American Republic, will be left without inhabitants. The houses will stand, some of them, not all, they will stand there but unoccupied. No people will inhabit them. It will be the same in regards to numerous other cities. At another time, he said, the great and powerful populous city of New York, that may be considered to be the greatest city of the world, will in a few years become a mass of ruins.
Holy smokes.
And it's going to get worse. Should I keep going?
Yeah,
How's it gonna
Do you want to talk now? It's time to talk.
I know.
I've had a theory for a long time. This is unrelated. Well, kind of related. Is that why not? You guys know what short selling is, right?
What?
Why not short sell the market? if you believe in the gospel and you believe in the second coming, the financial institutions have to
You're gonna
crash.
fail. Yeah.
Great, that's great.
So
So-
you're
The trouble
stuck.
is, if you short sell, you probably still can't collect because
No, you,
Nobody
on a
collect
short
from.
sale, you
What's-
collect,
what's
you
short selling
collect
again?
first.
What's short selling again?
You sell it for $100 and buy it back. If it goes down, you can buy it back for cheaper than you. So you sell it for $100 stock. You sell it for $100, it drops in value. You buy it back for $50. You keep the difference.
I think real estate sounds pretty good in Utah.
You saw.
I'd say
In Idaho.
keep the orchards
Don't let Tanner
pruned.
sell.
Keep the orchards pruned. I'm putting in more trees tomorrow. That's it.
You, Sarah, Jake, you gotta get on the Petersons.
Seriously, get them to lower their price to buy their house.
Yeah, Sarah.
Maybe you can go in with Tyler and Alex.
Hey,
Like four
that's
of
a
you
good
can
idea.
live there.
We call it master bedroom.
Brilliant idea.
No, they should. Well, if they're gonna do that, they should buy Tanner's house because Tanner's house is big enough for both couples.
Please.
Yeah,
No,
but
no.
Tanner needs to come
No,
to his
no,
house.
no.
We need to
Sarah,
get the
when there are
Petersons
bodies in
land.
the street, they'll
buy
be
the
happy.
Petersons and build another house in the back of it.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I call it front house.
We can build a house at the end of our lane.
Have
As long as
house.
we're in Utah, we're okay, right?
No, you need to be on our land.
You need land.
You
A
need
condo
that
has
land.
no land. That 1.5 acre
I bet the
park
Hans
means
will
nothing.
still sell. That opens up to our backyard.
Wait, did they take it off the market?
Don't show Ali's parents this video.
All right, Roy, keep it going.
I still want to take the Ivers property over. Can we take that over?
Okay, so what are your thoughts on secret combinations?
Tyler,
Obama.
I
Secret
agree.
combinations destroyed the Nephites and they destroyed the Jaredites.
and they will destroy
And
us.
think about it. I don't want to maybe make too many illusions, but you hear a lot about the drug trafficking now that's spilled over the border.
Oh.
And there's bans now, and they're saying Utah is the new magnet
Oh, yeah.
for the marijuana and the drug traffickers because there's a lot more wilderness space
Yeah.
that's off the radar, and it's hospitable for a lot of reasons. So you might start seeing across the country more and more of these rogue, even illegal immigrant bands that are just like sabotaging.
They are.
Okay, I have a question. If Utah is supposed to be Zion, everybody comes for safety, how come when we were younger you told us that Salt Lake City was going to run with blood?
It's going to.
Who's going to what the
It's
play?
like-
Dad,
Run
did you hear
with
that?
blood.
No.
Did you hear Sarah?
Oh, the streets of Salt Lake will run
Well,
with
the
blood.
majority of
She
Salt Lake
said
City isn't
if
one.
It'll
it's
become
supposed
one of
to
the
be
most wicked
haven of
cities in the
safety,
world.
Why is Salt Lake City going to be one of the wickedest cities in the world?
Because there's going to be a lot of people come here that are not Mormons, and a lot of Mormons. What Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball said. They said that the Mormons, their biggest downfall is going to be they're going to be too engrossed in the things of this world.
So not all Mormons are
Isn't that
being saved.
interesting that last conference the warning was, do not be engrossed in the things of this world?
That's
You notice
code.
that?
That's code word for in Zion there is safety, and when Zion deteriorates, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Because when you turn your back on Zion, which is the whole spirit of not being worldly, it's the opposite of worldly.
Does that mean I shouldn't buy those curtains?
Curtains are okay. We'll start in January. But
Curtains are perfectly acceptable. in
yeah,
Zion.
But they're very
Why,
worldly.
then that,
curtains.
that,
Gotta cover your
Very
windows.
so Zion,
worldly.
it really isn't, this isn't a safety haven then, if it's going to be,
Well, Salt
Well,
Lake
you
City
know,
might
can
not.
you-
Salt Lake City might have its
Well,
own
you
problems.
Dude, I
think
wouldn't
about
live
it
in Salt Lake
this.
City
Other
for
parts.
$1 million.
Heber C. Kimball
It's
said
already
this.
bad.
After a while, the Gentiles will gather to this place. Remember, Gentiles are Christians that are not Mormons. Heber C. Kimball was the second most prophesying man in the church. The number one was Joseph Smith. And right behind him was Heber C. Kimball. He had more prophecies than any man except Joseph Smith. After a while, this is Heber C. Kimball talking, after a while the Gentiles will gather to this place by the thousands, and Salt Lake will be classified among the wicked cities of the world. A spirit of speculation and extravagance will take possession of the saints, and the result will be financial bondage. Persecution will come next, and all true Latter-day Saints will be tested to the limit. Many will apostatize, and others will stand still, not knowing what to do. Darkness will cover the earth, and gross darkness the minds of this people.
So what'll happen is a big chunk of the church in this area will just wither,
Well,
and the other part will coalesce and retrench, and reestablish Zion on its own terms, maybe somewhere
I think
else. You know?
debt's a huge thing too.
Wait,
Like,
wait,
if you think of the consumer debt in Utah and just the saints have already done.
just be quiet.
Okay, let's go one step farther. Brigham Young.
Wait.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah, you keep me honest, Marine.
Just go poke your head up there.
Max is saying, "Why did you bring me into this world?" He's been listening to
I
us.
think it's a mob witch. It's a mob coming.
That'd be terrifying to have no law and order.
Well, no, you think about
I'd have good guns.
why would this be, or how could this evolve into a haven? You take away the institutions of the government, and what other organization out there in the world has any structure
No,
or
yeah.
order?
Family. That's why there's.
No,
No, that's not
enough.
the family.
Well, right,
Well,
it's
the
not.
church.
You know what? It comes back to the whole argument we had about
If you're in
how,
the East Coast, you're dead.
like we talked about in church today, like how the world's gone from terrestrial to telestial. The mode it's in right now is not set up that if the government, which is a safety net, collapsed, people, the way they live now, there's no cohesion. It would fall apart so fast
Yeah.
because everyone's on their own. In California, nobody even knows their neighbors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, what
Let me give you one more.
what kind of place would you want to live in if that happened? You want to live here?
One more nugget, then we can continue this conversation here. You guys can. Does Anna want to hear this?
It's on tape. She'll see it later.
Okay, Brigham Young's. Oh, it's Ryder. Okay, Brigham Young said this. Many of this people, for the sake of riches and popularity, will sell themselves for that which cankers the soul and lead them down to misery and despair. It would be better for them to dwell in wigwams among the Indians than to dwell with the Gentiles and miss the glories of God, which God wishes for them to obtain. And Brigham Young also said, I do not worry about the saints in poverty, but when the Lord sees fit to open up the great oil reserves in Utah, I tremble for them.
Tremble for who?
Us.
The
Saints.
same.
Us,
Why?
So what's he saying there? So
What
he's
is he
saying
saying?
Because we'll
Because-
become rich and we'll forget God.
the desire to go after riches
so
and
buy a lot of land
popularity.
here in Utah. There's a lot of oil here.
But then we'll become materialistic.
Well, and Brigham Young echoed that thought by
Yeah,
saying,
I'm gonna move back to the edge of my house.
he said that the saints are going to be tried a
I
lot
don't
more by
wanna be
riches than by their
materialistic.
suffering.
So what's that whole like wigwam thing? The wigwams and the Indians. It's better to live with the Indians than to live here if you're not living right. What was that about?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, missionary work. There's going to be 4 main missions. One is the mission to the Gentile nations. Sarah, who are the Gentiles?
The Christians that aren't Mormons.
Exactly. And that's going on right now. After that is closed and the wars of terrible destruction happen, it's going to be the mission to the house of Israel. Okay? That hasn't happened yet. The Jews, the lost 10 tribes, the Lamanites. That's when the Lamanites, you know the Lamanites are going to rise. That's when it's going to rise. It's going to rise after the Gentiles have been sealed. And then, after that, there's going to be a mission to the heathen nations, which isn't going to happen until after Christ, until right before Christ comes, after the Battle of Armageddon. So that's way off. And then there's going to be a final mission to all mankind.
It may not be so way off. I mean, who would have thought that the Russian wall would come down that quick? And we're told that Christ is going to come like a thief in the night. It may not be as way off as we come from.
Well,
And-
think of the bickering right now on both sides of the with the Democrats and Republicans. I mean, it's getting pretty bad.
And look how fast the economy went down. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's-
really, if a couple of key pillars
I think
collapsed fast,
terrorism. Like if there are some
Terrorism?
attacks, like, I think attacks.
and the
would
drug
really try.
trafficking from Mexico kind of spills over, you add some swine flu in there, epidemic, it would not take very long for a couple of things, seriously. It would not take long for things to get to the
It's Jenner's
point.
mind working.
You can, it's true, you would not take
Welcome to
much.
my world, Ken.
And the terrorists know it. I mean,
agree with them.
everyone in the know is thinking, why, there's so many ways to just bring the country to its knees, why haven't they done more? Because it really wouldn't be
doesn't take more
hard.
than 1 or 2 things
You
that
know.
people, like Jenna
It's
was saying,
panic,
nobody
too.
has
It's
infrastructure.
fear.
And
They'll
there's-
panic.
There's no family
People
units.
will panic.
If the government fell, so many people in big metro areas would just be completely
Did you
in
read that
panic mode.
Schwarzenegger is saying that
Chaos
if they
mode.
can't, if they don't get some relief and the permission to raise these taxes and get it voted, they are gonna have to, cut back the community services, like police, and they're gonna let people out of prison. They can't afford to keep them in prison, they're just gonna open a lot of, put them back on the streets. And then what was the other brilliant thing that was like, oh, I feel safe?
He was in Nicaragua. I think it was where Noriega was. What was that?
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
Yeah.
When the military came in and took over and took Noriega out of power. But it was a pretty long lecture, but it was just about how he was there in the city when it happened. He got picked up by some troops that were going in, like in the tanks to go in. They were protecting him because it was just all out. Like they went there bombing and just kind of like a mini Iraq. But he was there with the main troops, and they're walking in. They went to Noriega's like actual palace, where his quarters. And he said he saw with his own eyes. He actually saw and felt, and like he didn't feel them. He saw the documents. When they were going in there was in his room. He saw there was a lot of money, like a lot of cash, like $2 million just in his room. And he saw there was these documents that he saw on the front page that said actual secret combination, and it had a list of names of signatures from people that you recognize. So it said there were some actual politicians who you know that had signed the document, and there was this kind of an actual like an allegiance. And it said that when he got back, he had to go to Washington and tell them what he knew and what he saw, and they debriefed him a little bit. And I guess I don't know what happened, but he had to testify to them. It was very kind of hush hush though, I guess. And then he just changed his name and had to live. But it's interesting. I mean, I don't really know. I haven't heard much about it ever since then. But it was just a lecture he gave.
But a secret combination, some sort of a secret
He
pact.
said he saw like an actual thing with. He said that he saw some of the signatures there, and then it said secret combination since the beginning of time. It's like there's been, and he said that he has no doubt that there are combinations.
The document
The
said.
document says secret combination, and it was like it didn't. I'm not sure what it was, but something to the theme of like since the beginning of time, like it's never ended, and like there was a list of people that signed, and that you would recognize. There's some politicians that you recognize that are on there.
Wow.
So take it for what it's worth. I don't know if it's totally true, but the guy said that. I mean, he was active LDS. Said these stories in his life. He saw the actual document.
Wow.
Isn't there a movie about that?
Okay, let's finish up this mission to the Gentiles, okay? Then we're going to get into some really juicy stuff, okay?
Oh.
It gets really bad, okay?
Oh, great.
Okay, right now, we're defining terms. Gentiles are Christians who are not Mormons. Heathens are people who have not accepted Christianity. The time of the Gentiles is when the gospel begins to be preached to the Gentile nations. The fullness of the Gentiles is what we're in right now. That's when the gospel basically is going to all Christian nations, okay? Now, and the next term is fulfilling the time of the Gentiles. When the time is fulfilled. Now, this is a key point. This is the ending of the missionary labor to the Gentiles because of their wickedness and refusal to accept the gospel. When this event takes place, the second missionary period will begin, the first missionary period will end, and this is what's going to happen. When that time happens, then the wars of complete destruction will begin. God's judgment will be poured out on the world via plagues, disease, earthquakes, thunderings, lightnings. Israel will be gathered to Palestine. So even though Israel's going to Palestine now, they're going very, very slowly. There are more Jews in New York City than there are in Palestine. But then when this time happens, it's going to be so unsettled, they're going to flee for their safety. And they're going to go en masse to Palestine. Okay? The saints at this time will go back to New Jerusalem, and the lost tribes will come down from the north. Okay? Now we have finished the mission to the Gentiles, okay? Now we're going to go on to the other stuff. Or do you want to quit?
Hello, what time is it?
It's 10:30.
We have got a long ways to go. We have
I
covered
don't
about
want to
1:10.
quit. This would be a good place to stop.
How much farther do you want to go?
Well, I
can
mean,
stay for a few more minutes.
Go to one more step.
let's try to get a little bit because I want to go.
Yeah.
We'll go one more episode, but I want to get.
One more step.
Okay, this is a Brigham Young, okay? Brigham Young said this: when the testimony of the elders ceases to be given, and the Lord says to them, "Come home, I will now preach my own sermon to the nations of the earth." All you now know can scarcely be called a preface to the sermon that will be preached by fire and sword and tempest and earthquakes and hail and rain and thunder and lightning and fearful destruction. What matters the destruction of a few railway cars? You will hear of magnificent cities now idolized by people, sinking in the earth, entombing the inhabitants. The sea will heave itself beyond the bounds, engulfing mighty cities. Famine will spread over nations, and nations will rise up against nation, kingdom against kingdom, state against state. In our own country and in foreign lands, they will destroy each other, caring not for the blood and lives of their neighbors or their families. What's the key to that? When the elders are called home.
But didn't I hear you say that the elders will be called home and the saints shall be called out of those countries? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's what it says here, yeah.
Can't we go put 'em
Now
down?
this is important. Nevertheless,
Wanna go try and put 'em down?
Zion shall escape it. She will observe to do all things that I have commanded. Zion will basically escape it.
And
If we don't become so
If we don't become wicked.
Generous as you
worldly.
oh, it's empty. I think.
Orson Pratt
Do
said,
you want to put them down or you
and
want
he's
to
talking about America
He'll
here,
go
he
down
says,
easier if you do it.
with judgments that are terribly severe, they will cause them to lie by hundreds and thousands unburied from one end of the United States to the other. To be meat
Wait,
for
back
the
up. What'd you say?
Orson Pratt said that during this time of eternal destruction.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry.
Now the missionary
Dad.
work finishes.
Wait, start.
When the missionary work ceases,
Wait,
We got a baby.
Ryder was being too loud. We couldn't hear you.
Okay, take two and action.
okay, this completion to the missionaries to the Gentiles is huge, because that's when it really gets tough. Orson Pratt says, talking about America, future destruction of America, he says God will visit the American continent with judgments that are terribly severe, that will cause him to light hundreds upon thousands of unburied people from one end of this land to the other, to be meat for the fowls of the air and beasts of the field. Why? Because the judgments will be swift, giving no time for burial.
wow.
So again, you have that theme of it coming so
And then
fast.
He says this, inquires one, do you really believe that such judgments are coming upon our nations? I not nearly believe it, I know it.
Who said that?
Nevertheless, Orson Pratt, nevertheless Zion shall escape.
In 4th Nephi, it mentions how within a few generations, this fair people, it mentions that in 4th Nephi, how only in a few generations, they went from being, I don't know what it was, delicate or
Delightsome.
delightsome, and going to complete just,
Depravity.
yeah,
Cannibalism.
It only
cannibalism,
took, yeah,
and they were
Torture.
destroyed. So it can happen fast within a few generations.
or less.
Heber C.
That's
Kimball
years.
says this, you've all heard this one. He said the western boundaries of, the early Mormons were really into Missouri because they'd been driven out. They lived there, they'd been driven out. So Missouri was really a big topic to them. And Heber C. Kimball said this, the western boundaries of the state of Missouri will be swept so clean of its inhabitants that, as President Young tells us, when we return to that place, there will be not so much as a yellow dog left to wag its tail. You've all heard that one.
The western boundary, that's toward us.
Yeah.
That's
where Far
where
West was, that's Jackson
Yeah.
County.
that's where all the church was. Zion.
I want to keep going. I don't know. Yes.
I know, me too. You have school in the morning, Sarah?
Yeah.
Skip it.
Okay, keep going.
Last week.
Oh, yay.
We have to get our money's worth because you guys are going to be gone for like a month.
That's true.
Wow.
3 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And if this happens while you're gone, you might never come back because
No, we gotta finish this lecture
you
series.
can't cross the waters.
No.
We'll have a spiritual famine while Dad is
The
out.
flyer
of
was
town.
a lot.
The planes will start. You have to walk across the land bridge or something.
By Alaska. Around.
Poor rider. So.
Okay, now this is kind of scary. Joseph Smith warns, talking about the judgments that are going to come.
No, it's okay.
A revelation given to Joseph Smith warns that they will come upon the wicked and unfaithful members of the church before they spread to other people. So he's going to clean out the Mormons first.
Wait a minute.
Wait, okay, I'm sorry.
What?
Wait a
Swine
minute.
flu.
Say that one more time.
Say that again?
Heber's not very righteous lately.
I don't like that one.
Joseph Smith said
Heber?
Swine flu?
that before
Park
he
City.
gets everyone else, he's going to get the unfaithful and the wicked members of the church.
So there'll be an
Before he goes
internal cleansing
Yeah.
in the church, which makes sense. I mean,
Alright, so
for
for
other-
scripture study? Or
Well,
Heber C. Kimball
Well,
says
That's what this is, right?
think about it.
Prayer?
If so many things get bad externally, Zion
Has to be tight.
has to be rock tight. It's got to be so faithful.
It has to be purged.
There is no room for like
So how does that happen?
the weak links.
Does
and
it
so
say how that happens,
disease.
Dad?
it might be
Probably
through,
diseases.
The word of wisdom, we promise that the destroying angel will pass his case.
or it could be like financial. Maybe they leave the church somehow. Or, I
Yeah,
don't
but it
know.
could be a falling away, or
Could be falling
would they
away.
actually be killed?
Could be
Wiped
falling
out?
away.
I see it more as a falling away then.
Yeah.
Okay, now let me give you some.
Because if they're weak, then they're
I'll
already
give you some good
susceptible.
words here. I'll give you some bad words and some good words, okay? The bad words first by Heber C. Kimball. Before that day cometh, however, the saints will be put to a test that will try the integrity of the best of them. The pressure will become so great that the more righteous among them will cry unto the Lord day and night until deliverance comes. I don't like that.
I could see it being kind of like if the church gets more, like takes more of a stance, like we are going to do this,
Yeah.
and we get more criticized. Because right now we're not mainstream, but we're not like, you know what I'm saying?
We're
So
trying hard
if
to
we
fit
become more like, you know what, you're all like, you're
Controversial,
wrong. Yeah,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So I could see that being kind of harder for some members of the church who are like, oh, I don't want to be like this. I want to
That would
be,
make a lot of
I want to
sense.
conform.
And you know what?
Prop 8, there's a
Yeah.
lot of
And there are an awful lot of Mormons who are comfortable being one foot in the world, who
Yeah.
would not like the harder
So
stance.
I could see that being the case, but
And
there's
they're not
so
gonna
we
wanna
have to,
stick
like,
around.
the prophet says, okay, you're not
Okay,
going to
now
do
let
this
me
or
give you
this.
some good stuff. This is Wilford Woodruff said this. Can you tell me where the people are who will be shielded and protected from these great calamities and judgments which are to come upon our door? I'll tell you, the priesthood of God, who honor their priesthood and who are worthy of their blessings, are the only ones who shall have this safety and protection. They are the only mortal beings, other than people who have a right to be shielded, that have a right to be shielded from these judgments. Then he goes on and says, and then Brigham Young says this. He says, there is one principle I would like to have the Latter-day Saints perfectly understand. That's this: of blessings and cursings. For instance, we read that the war, pestilence, plagues, famines will be visited upon the inhabitants of this earth. But if distress through the judgments of God come upon this people, it will be because the majority of them have turned away from God. Then he says this: if 6/10 or 3/4 of this people will keep the commandments of God, the curse and judgment of the Almighty will never come upon this people.
Wow, that's important.
So Salt Lake and other
Stay with your
areas
neighbor.
might fall
That's what I'm
away,
saying, 'cause
but
Salt
Zion
Lake
is where it's at.
40% LDS.
And if you stick with the majority of the brethren and the priesthood, that's where Zion is. That's where you're safe. So even
Bountiful and
if
Provo
Salt Lake falls away, or even if
and-
Provo falls away.
Isn't that crazy when they say the majority of the brethren? Can you imagine any of those people falling away?
Well,
I can't.
think about Missouri though.
Well, I know. Well, they say
Remember
if
that?
you stay with the majority of the brethren,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But can you imagine any of our brethren right now
I always thought Bednar was
ever
kind of a
going
weak
against
link,
the prophet?
but other. I could see him and Scott, but it's.
Oh, gender.
Okay, let me summarize what I've just said here. After the Gentiles are closed, then the Lord is going to preach a sermon. There will be great calamities, disasters caused by nature. There will be pestilence, desolating sickness covers the United States, AIDS maybe, swine flu, I don't know. The sickness will come mainly upon the wicked, but some of the saints who are righteous will still suffer. Pestilence will continue to be poured out from time to time until the earth is empty. Famines. The Lord said there will be a great hailstorm. It's going to happen in the year when you do not see a rainbow. So if you see a rainbow, you're okay for that year.
So there's no rain?
Only the hailstorm, or just?
Well, there's going to be a hailstorm that destroys the crops. There's going to be drought. There's going to be a serious lack of water.
And
Water,
therefore no rainbow,
drought.
there's no water, no rain.
Water pollution is going to be a serious problem. There's going to be earthquakes, floods, tidal wave storms.
The water buckets, Mom.
Cities will be destroyed.
I want to buy that.
Aren't you glad you're in Utah?
Utah's
Yeah,
dry
yeah,
as
yeah,
state.
yeah.
Time. Very glad.
I want that big one we saw at the home
We need
show.
the one at the home show that's like 50.
And although the manner of destruction
500
has not been
gallons.
revealed, Jackson County, Missouri, the site for the New Jerusalem is going to be swept clean from inhabitants. Now this is the part I want you to get. The saints will suffer from these calamities to a degree, but in general escape the worst of these disasters to the extent that they are righteous. Anyone want to go to the temple tomorrow?
Yeah.
Monday. It's closed.
Monday.
Actually, it's open Monday mornings.
Only till
Okay.
like
Tuesday
8 though, isn't
morning.
it?
11.
I've often thought it would be a good idea to go back and buy some property now in Jackson, because we're going back there anyways, and just pass it down to after they're here.
But what's it worth when the government
Obviously
fails?
not.
But when it fails and gets wiped clean, you'll lose everything.
Yeah,
It'd
terrible
be
idea.
just like private land.
Sorry, no, I'm just saying, it's bad
No,
investment.
that's
bad
why
investment.
I brought it up, because I
Economy's
also
going down.
agree it's a bad idea.
Buy gold.
You really feel bad.
Don't be shy.
Okay,
Man.
this is Joseph Smith. And I don't know, now we're talking about the internal, those are the pestilence and the plagues. And now the internal wars is next.
That's what I want to hear.
So wait, you get all the pestilence and plagues, and then we get internal wars?
Well, that's
Yeah,
just
then-
God.
Well, see, the
chastising
pestilence and
us.
plagues are going to destroy the governments. They're going to destroy any form of organization.
Infrastructure, yeah.
And there's going to be mobs, and then that's going to be internal war. I mean, you take away order, mobs just kind of rise up.
No,
okay?
Dad, can I ask you something? Are you by chance going to get at all into the White Horse Prophecy?
Not
I
today.
love their prophecy.
That is a good one.
If it's even relevant.
Okay, Joseph Smith said this, in 1833, the prophet wrote the following letter to N.E. Seton, a newspaper editor. And now I am prepared to say by the authority of Jesus Christ that not many years shall pass away before the United States shall present such a scene of bloodshed as has not been paralleled in the history of our nation. Pestilence, hail, famine, earthquake will sweep the wicked of this generation from off the face of the land to open and prepare the way for the return of the lost tribes of Israel to the north. So he's saying that these terrible wars of destruction are going to sweep the wicked off so that the 10 tribes can come down. He also says this, he says, now this is terrible, This is here. Close your ears, Sarah.
There's
The
one
prophet
he
said,
worries about.
Some may cry peace, but the saints in the world will have little peace from henceforth. I saw men hunting the lives of their own sons, and brothers murdering brothers, women killing their own daughters, and daughters seeking the life of their mothers. I saw armies arrayed against armies. I saw blood, desolation, fires. The Son of Man has said that the mother shall be against the daughter, and the daughter against the mother.
What's new?
Oh, sad.
Why?
And it gets worse. But remember, the righteous saints, by and large, are going to avoid this.
I just need not fear.
You want to go farther?
Thanks, Dad.
I want to go
I
farther.
have a
Amen.
question
You
though.
want to call
My
it
battery
quits for
just
tonight
died.
and
What was my question?
resume in 3 weeks?
We can do it over at our house.
I've only covered about
Sorry.
10% of what I have.
Oh
Wait,
boy.
Awesome.
This might be
How
like
about
a,
let's do it tomorrow
this
night?
might be like a 3-part
This should be
series.
like a 3-part, yeah. Like
Yeah.
Three or
10-part
4.
series if you only got through 10%.
We got to talk about the New Jerusalem. We got to talk about the lost 10 tribes. We got to talk
Oh,
about.
that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the 10 tribes really quick. So there's 2 theories.
Yeah.
They're actually going to come out of the core of the earth, which I think is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, not the
personally.
core, like the icebergs. Come on.
All right,
There was a time I
icebergs,
Like
suspected
under the
that.
ice.
core,
Mom knows that.
that they're going to come out like of some hidden place. And then the other theory is that they're already amongst
They're
us.
dispersed
They just
amongst
haven't.
everyone.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
don't
learned in
believe-
my book of
I believe-
Mormon.
So everyone teaches that.
I believe
I think
they
that's
are
the
among
current
us,
stance
and
of the
they're
church.
bringing them
That's what
out little by little, but I think the main part of them are still together. Why do I believe that? Because we're told that their prophets are preparing their people to come forth.
How can
Therefore,
that
they got to
be?
be
They
in
gotta
there.
be together.
Well, what I learned in Book of Mormon, what my teacher
Yeah.
told me, was that their prophets are their bishops, stake presidents, and their leaders. That's what I was taught by my Book of
But are
Mormon.
they-
But
So
then
they're
they're not
LDS?
lost.
They're not
If they
LDS.
have bishops and
Then
state
they're
presidents,
LDS.
they're not lost.
Well,
We know where
okay.
they are.
Right
Right?
now,
There is an answer,
the
but it's
majority of the
Oh,
people
yes.
that are joining the church are of the descendants of Ephraim. I like 90% of everybody who joins the church now is from Ephraim. Okay? When this happens, the lost 10 tribes are not from Ephraim. They're from they're from
Manasseh, or-
They're from Manasseh and Simeon and
Benjamin.
Yeah.
and all
Aren't Manasseh mostly like the Lamanite people? Like the South American people? Aren't Manasseh mostly the South American people?
They could be, Manasseh, yeah. But the fact of the matter is almost everybody being converted right now is Ephraim. And when the 10 tribes come, then it's going to go to the rest of the house of Israel. Right now, it's to Ephraim. When the second phase is to the house of Israel, which is the Lamanites, which is the 10 tribes, which are not Ephraim. But who's going to take it to them? Ephraim's going to take it to them. I've got a book in my library called Ephraim. It's fascinating about what... You're sure ugly. Okay.
Not you, Sarah.
whoever's watching, they must be like, oh.
Well, I'm talking to myself.
Whoever's watching that.
Anyway,
Great great grandchild.
We have your genes. That's funny. But, you know, I have heard the answer about what Allie was saying. I think the official stance these
It
days,
definitely is. It's seminary
Is that
teachers. They said it. They're dispersed amongst.
they're backing off
Brother
the.
Goss even touched on that point.
They're backing
he
off
thought
the
that it
under
was
the earth thing.
ridiculous
That's-
that they're going to be coming out of some iceberg.
Well,
Yeah.
there's 3 theories actually. There's under like the North icebergs, a different planet. Other planet don't believe that. The North, like the North countries. Some guy wasn't like some like story about some guy like flew over the North part and
And
like his like all like they were
No,
weird.
that was the
he saw,
beginning-
he saw a valley of like
That's a
green.
mom.
That was the
That was
beginning of
awesome.
Santa Claus
Mom, you
2.
told me that story, Mom.
No, that's true.
That was Santa Claus 2 when the
that
airplane.
story too. Mom, urban legend.
No, but-
I'll talk to the pilot of this flight, see what he says.
But I think that
Where's your
the North
story?
countries, because you know that when Israel fell to
I think
Babylon,
Elder Uchtdorf talked about that right before that plane crashed into the mountain.
because
Okay,
it was
let's
off by
go.
1 degree.
Yeah,
let's go a
by
little
one
farther
degree.
here. Wilford Woodruff. Wilford Woodruff, he's a great guy. He had so many spiritual experiences. He's a man that walked with 1 foot in the spirit world and 1 foot in this world. Like one time he was walking down the street in Salt Lake City and he saw a man whose name, I think it was Brother Brown, but I'm not sure. And he says, Brother Brown, how are you doing? I'm fine. Now let's see, your father died 6 months ago, didn't he? Yes, he did. Let me think. No, I don't think I've seen him since then. Think about that. I mean, his spirituality was unbelievable. He just had a lot of experiences. Matter of fact, if you haven't read the life of Wilford Woodruff, you need to read it. It's a classic. As a matter of fact, Wilford Woodruff almost lost his life about 3 or 4 times. Okay, and he claims that Satan tried to kill him, and the reason he tried to kill him is because he knew he was going to write a biography. And an incredible amount of church history comes from Wilford Woodruff, because all the other people left the church. Emma kept a lot of the records of Joseph Smith. Sidney Rigdon left, and a lot of people left. But Wilford Woodruff was one of the few who kept. He said he felt that one of his most important things to do was to keep the records. And every night, faithfully, he wrote in his records. And you need to read. You need to read that. I have read it. Okay, this is what Wilford Woodruff. Matter of fact, Wilford Woodruff. He was small of stature, kind of like Jake, but he was a mighty man like Jake.
Jake, you're awesome.
He was. He's just like Jake.
Okay. Jake's not sure.
I asked myself, this is Wilford Woodruff, I asked myself the question, can the American nation escape? The answer comes, no. Its destruction, as well as the destruction of the world, is sure.
Oh.
We know that.
Okay.
Joseph Smith said this.
I thought it said if they repented
Well, we're not going to.
and became righteous.
But they're
they
not
would be
going
okay.
to. If they repented, they would be, but they're not
He
going
has to say that
The
because
prophet Joseph Smith said this, peace will be taken from the earth, and there will be no peace, only in the Rocky Mountains. This will cause many hundreds of thousands of honest in heart to gather here, not because they would be saints, but for safety and because they would not take up a sword against their neighbor.
You guys better not be taking up swords against us.
Good point.
Interesting that they say swords and not guns.
Yeah.
well, if there's no infrastructure and there's no gasoline or oil, I mean, you
You'll
can't
live
make
by
anything.
ammunition.
It's
And the bullets go
once
run out.
everything kind of like deteriorates, it's back to like barbaric, like
Yeah, and
slings
it can happen
stuff.
fast. I mean,
Okay,
that
this is
wouldn't-
good here. Brigham Young said this. Brigham Young said a lot of things. He said, an inland empire will be established in these valleys, right here, which will be a place of refuge for millions of people to gather to when the great day of judgments of God come upon the earth. And the righteous come here for safety. Our people will go east, west, north, and south, but the day will come when they will be glad to come back. We will be shut out from the rest of the world. So maybe, Mom, maybe we were inspired to come back here.
Let's hope so.
Well, you know, the church
I
has
have
their
no
own
doubt
satellites.
what's
We have our own satellites. I mean, we are set up for government to make the church with all of its structure. I mean,
Church
more than,
is-
more than anything in the entire world, other than like actual nations.
The church is a government.
Yeah.
Top to bottom, it's an absolute government.
Mom said that back in the floods, right?
In
Yeah.
fact, in many
That's
ways,
not-
it's a much better government than the actual government
There's
because
no one's paid.
we have boots on the ground. Like we have home teachers. Like from the level of your neighborhood up to the church office building, it's a complete, unbroken, perfect
Like
system.
10 phone calls, you can get to every.
I mean,
the level
Like our government. I mean, you're pretty detached from,
of Obama.
which might be a good thing, but you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, in a non-cynical world, you'd want that attachment.
Well, if you can't communicate with your troops or your police force or whatever at a time of crisis,
They're gonna go home
that's
to
what
their
happened
families.
in Katrina. You know, they all left.
Oh, that's a
Policemen
great
just
example.
walked off the job, and
Why?
looting just took over.
And that was a relatively
because their
minor
because they
crisis.
understand-
If the
Yeah.
entire
They didn't know if
nation,
their families were okay.
There could be much
So the
worse
police
things than
force
Katrina.
broke down, and there was no community
Jake was
structure.
there.
Yeah, and look what happened. I mean,
You were? Sorry,
Yeah.
it was mission one.
talk about a complete meltdown. That's a good example of just a small taste of what could happen
Yeah.
quickly.
And you
That
look at
happened
all
like
the
what, in a
people
day
that
or
were
two?
out of Homes and the people floating in the river. That
Yeah.
happened just in a matter of a day or two.
All the hospital people were just stuck.
And the hospital people were stuck, and the police left, the fire people, everybody left, because they had to go take care of their own families and try to get them out. And the mobs came in and started looting. Just
Why would you think that's a good idea?
what?
It was free for
I
the
do
taking.
not
because it's free
understand.
stuff.
Did you watch
Why?
CNN when
Free
just
stuff.
people were
That's
just?
the world
You're
is,
not
isn't
gonna
it?
get. It's gonna be
How is
water
that
damage.
not
You're
a
not
good
gonna
No, no,
get it
but
out
that's
there.
you know though.
How is that not a good
The
idea?
mentality.
Great idea.
Did you watch CNN? There were so many
Free
people
stuff?
in the Walmarts just
Yeah.
Heck
pulling
yeah.
off shelves, just walking out with it.
Imagine
It
the
was
crime
just-
as it is
Because
right
it was
now
a
with law
free- there was
enforcement.
no
There's no law
order.
enforcement, the crime
There was no
will be-
law.
Did you see that, Jake?
There was no enforcement. They
No
just
way to get caught?
greedy, selfish, tea-less people in a breakdown, you don't want to be there.
Jake saw
The only
that.
ones that weren't
Well,
were
like
really
Anna-
like Sam's
Anna-
Club. Kind of the bigger stores weren't so much.
They
Okay,
weren't
well,
working
the-
so badly.
No,
How come?
I guess
They
Let's
just
finish
people-
up
closed their
internal-
warehouse and
Let's finish up the internal destruction.
maybe families
okay?
working. I mean,
Okay.
people that worked there were there,
Huh.
kind of keeping it safe. But all the other stores were pretty
Let's
much
finish
all
up internal
destroyed.
wars and collapse of the U.S. government.
I think that's
Brigham
a
Young
good
said,
idea.
by and by there will be a gulf between the righteous and the wicked so that they cannot trade with each other and national intercourse will cease. And Heber C. Kimball said, the time is not far distant when the curtain will be dropped between us and the United States. Joseph Smith said, peace and safety in the Rocky Mountains would be protected by a corridor band of the white horse, which is the church, and the red horse, which is the Lamanites. Brigham Young said, the day will come when you strangers will have to come to us for bread to eat, and we will be your saviors here upon Mount Zion. You don't believe it now, but you wait a little while, and you will see that it's coming to pass.
Are the South Pacific people, are they considered part of the House of Israel? I think they've been told that in prophecy.
Who?
Not for
The
sure.
South Pacific people,
Yeah,
the Tongans, the Samoans, the people that receive the gospel, are they the house of the blood of Israel?
yeah, they're the house of
They're
Israel.
not Gentiles, or the blood of Israel,
Yeah.
they could be Gentiles.
Well,
But I'm saying, could
there's
they,
different
could
theories,
they,
though.
they're not part of the Lamanites.
Well, they are. There's a scripture. It's just a brief paragraph, and it's somebody named Hagoth in the Book of Mormon went
Yeah.
on a
He
boat,
left.
and there's been
Yeah,
that's right.
revelation from modern prophets saying that that's the people of the
Right.
Pacific Islands, and
Mm-hmm.
That they left and never came back,
yeah.
and that's
So
what.
they
There's
were-
like, it's
they
like a
are-
scripture in the Book of Mormon,
They are
but
part of
then
the house.
No,
modern
they'd
day
be part of the
revelation
House of
says.
Israel.
So they're-
Because when you
Oh,
talk about
right,
the
right, right,
Lamanites, who did you say was gonna, the red horse would be the Lamanites and
Yeah.
the white horse is the house of Israel?
Maybe we
White
should go
horse
into the
is
white
the
horse
church.
The
prophecy.
church?
Let's do it.
Because
Let's
I
do the white
gotta
horse
tell you-
prophecy.
I gotta tell you, that example, that just gives me chills, is that when the mobs were coming at the LA temple, and the Samoans, those big
I want to hear
Samoans,
the story. What
just,
happened?
you haven't heard this?
No.
Okay, during Prop 8,
Sorry. I don't know.
Last November,
last November, the mobs, the Prop 8 demonstrators were just out in force, and they had threatened to storm the
temple.
LA temple.
With all the gays that were out there, I guess.
Yeah, and the supporters.
It's not right.
there was a lot of
There were
people.
thousands and thousands of them marching.
They were pretty mean looking. They were
Really mad.
like riled up, right?
Really
Hit me
angry
with
at the
your pink
Mormons.
boa.
And so the people that
It was like a mob.
They were trying to go to the temple.
Yeah.
They were trying to keep the temple open. People were trying to get off the off ramp, and they couldn't even get off the off ramp to go in the gates of the temple because there were so many mobs stopping their cars. It was really scary.
Right.
But one of the great stories that came out of this is when the people finally did get to the temple, they reported. They said they looked up, and all the mobs were coming, and there was a wall of huge Tongans. They were not so, in their white shirts and ties. They were just standing in front of the gate.
That's
Like,
awesome.
Bring it on, you know? And they just lined the
My
gates
dad
of the
loves
temple.
Tongans.
And
I
they,
love Tongans.
yeah, and some was there's just huge
Josh, the biggest
Polynesian
one,
guys.
there were 2 LDS Tongans on there, on Biggest Lizard. They were great.
Really?
Were they?
They
That'd
were
be great. Well, they were lining the thing, and they were guarding the gate to let the cars come in and do their temple sessions. And the mobs were out there, but none of them, and several of the commentators, the news commentators, commented, well, we don't know who these are. They appear to be just members of church. They don't appear to be anything formal. They're in their shirts, white shirts and ties, right? Standing out there.
Interesting.
But can you
I wonder who
imagine?
organized that. I suppose like the bishops.
I
or...
bet they just did it on their own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when
I
I
wouldn't
bet they
surprise
they were
me.
outside the gate. I
Just
bet they
making sure
just
nothing
up,
went crazy. Yeah.
And they just said, we're here.
Well, wasn't when they were asked questions like, "What are you doing
Yeah.
here? Are you gonna fight these people?" Or and what was
They said
their?
no,
They said
no.
no.
No, we're not here to fight. We're just here to make sure that things stay orderly. This is our temple.
Oh, there was
you
a
know?
line
They
that
were
one
just
guy
very
said that was
calm.
That's cool though.
But I guess they were hugely intimidating
Yeah.
to the mobs.
I'm sure, especially
So I just
To all the gay artists in
Okay,
Hollywood.
I want to just finish up internal collapse
Oh,
of the
yeah.
United States government. The struggle in the United States will take place after the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled, after the missionaries come home, and then that missionary period stops. That's why I always tell everyone, when the missionaries come home, hold your hat, okay? This will at this time, wars will rage in foreign lands, not just America. It's going to rage all over the world. The saints will gather to the top of the mountains. Those members of the church who remain in other countries and other areas of the country will be persecuted and driven out by the mobs. Righteous non-members will come to the tops of the mountains. The saints and the Gentiles, the righteous Gentiles who live in Salt Lake, in the tops of the mountains, will eventually be completely cut off from the rest of the country. Now this is interesting. The great increase in population in the West will place the people in danger of famine unless the saints have sufficient food supplies stored to provide for the newcomers as well as themselves. The war will cause the complete collapse of the United States, the national and state governments.
Oh boy.
I can see that.
Okay.
I can see
The
that.
next topic we're going to talk
Do I
about,
need to say that?
we're going to
from-
talk about the kingdom of
Much
God,
bigger.
which is the political government which is going to run the country.
Okay.
You know-
So we're not doing it.
Oh, that's so good. But we
What about
can't
tomorrow?
translate.
Oh,
I
let's do
can't
it
wait till
Wait,
after
what's the
Europe.
next
How
one?
about tomorrow?
Okay, can we do it tomorrow?
The kingdom of God that's going to run the country in the
Find
absence.
that interesting?
Is that when the
Yes.
Constitution's going to hang by a thread?
Pardon?
Will they use the Constitution?
Newsflash. It's hanging by a thread.
I know, but is that the kingdom of God? Is that part of that?
We'll get to it
The kingdom
tomorrow.
of God is the kingdom set up by Joseph Smith. It actually functioned for a while, but the anti-Mormons hated it. They hated it, and it was one of the causes of the real persecution. But it was kind of latent in Brigham Young's time. Never really got going. But when this happens, it's going to be reestablished.
Well, we have the numbers
It's
right now
going to
to
be
do it.
it's going to be run by a council of 50, and they will not all be Mormons. There'll be
But will
non-Mormons
they
as well
honor
as
the
Mormons.
Constitution, or is that, where's the whole thing about the Constitution? Is that in that?
I think I just skipped that. I'm going to go back and read that.
I want to hear about the Constitution. I would like to just end on that note.
I think
You
we
know
got
where it
enough
is.
for tonight.
What?
You got 5
Okay.
minutes. Go.
Let's touch on that last topic.
What about the white horse prophecy?
I mean, we're already up. It's not going to matter.
Oh, if you want to stay after that, when he leaves, I'll take over. And
There you go.
White
Oh,
Horse
yeah.
Prophecy.
Good night.
Good night, Sarah.
Oh no, I'm just,
Oh.
She's adjusting.
it's hot in here. I think it's that light in her face.
Yeah, that might be it.
Possibly the
Can we
heat
turn it
lamp
off?
that's on
Go
you.
right in your face with the baby.
You know, you can put it down
I don't know
here.
which one.
Oh, there's
Sort
no
of
baby
rug
in my
fire.
stomach. Come
And you're fine. Jake, we don't know, you could be having twins.
We're turning into beef jerky over here. It's like-
Seriously, do you want to sit on the floor? That's like blasted hot. Poor pregnant
on.
baby.
Get my tan.
This is some good stuff on the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is
Oh,
the political
moved at the wrong
organization
time.
we set up by the church to politically run.
Isn't that amazing when you can see that the only thing that can step forward and really take over when everything else breaks down is the church, the kingdom of God?
I can totally
That-
see that, yeah.
That is, people don't get it.
Okay.
Nobody appreciates that like the Mormons do. That's for
Okay,
sure.
here we go.
The kingdom of God is a separate organization from the church of God. The kingdom of God is the political organization. Okay. The church of God is the religious organization. Okay, Joseph Smith said this according to Brigham Young. Will the Constitution be destroyed? No, it will be held inviolate by this people. And as Joseph Smith said, the time will come when the destiny of this nation will hang upon a single thread. At that critical juncture, this people will step forth and save it from the threat of destruction.
So they would, the kingdom of
Just
God
turn
will
it off.
honor
Well, because the
the
Constitution
Constitution
is, like, it's sake of we
It
believe
is
in it.
inspired,
So I can
yeah.
see,
Yeah.
I can see it's going forth to say the Constitution because
Yeah,
it was inspired
and
by
using
God.
that as the basis of government.
Yeah, like to restore it and kind of bring it back. Or,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, wow, that's so exciting. Do you guys know we live in such exciting times? This is
So does
really
Sarah.
exciting.
Well, it's not gonna be exciting to see people.
Sarah,
no matter,
news,
no matter how
news
wicked they are, it's not gonna be exciting to see people
hurt.
suffer and die and starve to death.
Good
even
shot.
though
But
they're
listen, listen. I think you picked to come at this time,
I'm sure you did.
so you can handle it.
kids.
You can do it.
Just because of Jake, that's why she wanted to come.
Well, it's not even picked. I think Heavenly
Jake
Father
said, "Come, come."
knew that we were strong enough
Okay.
to handle it.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
by, I mean,
I
he
don't
wouldn't
want
give
my
us any
kids
challenge
to
that
go
we
through
couldn't
that.
overcome.
Good
Oh
thought.
no, that
Big
does not
bad
sound like a
choices.
good time. What?
Okay, we are about
That's your job to teach
Showing
us,
Showing
sir.
through
Satan's
this
plan.
Well, it's good stuff, Dad, good
I'm not
stuff.
Wait, did we finish that last topic about the
That was
Constitution?
it.
Yeah, that was it.
So a quick recap then, or?
No, no,
But
no.
I think we've had enough.
Yeah.
The kingdom of God is the next topic.
Can we have it in Europe next Sunday?
Oh no.
Can we
not
telecast
that.
We'll do it on Skype. You guys
Not
can
without
do it on
Skype, and that's a good
Telecast
idea.
it.
You could totally take.
You
a
could
video
do it in front of the
Skype.
Eiffel Tower.
Okay, the next topic we're going to
Actually,
cover,
in Europe, where it's going to
Are
be
the
destroyed.
kingdom of
on
God-
location.
There you
the
go.
New Jerusalem,
Big budget, ooh. They went to Europe to film
four
it.
important things in America, which is the coming of Christ, Adam on Diamond, and all that kind of stuff. and the gathering of the Jews to Palestine. So that'll be the next 4 topics. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about 2 things. I realize it's late, so it won't go for a very long time. We're going to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we're going to talk about the book of Jasher. And Jake, you made an interesting comment about the book of Jasper as we were coming in.
I don't know much about the book of Jasher.
You said it was part of CSI. They sold this
CSI, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, interesting thing is you think about Christ.
Part of CFI?
CSI.
Crime Scene Investigation.
What?
Not crimes.
All I heard was CSI. What?
It's like on a
TV show. What's that?
Cedar Fort.
What's
It's a
that?
book publishing.
Here,
company.
I'll
Very
tell you
similar
what
to-
I want
Good publishing.
Oh, you used to work for them? I love their books.
What'd you do?
Yeah, good books.
It was over the returns.
Anyway, this is a pretty popular book, and okay. How long did Christ live upon the earth?
33.
I don't mean that. How long was his ministry?
3 years.
Was 3 years. How many days do we have in the New Testament of Christ's ministry?
3 days.
30 days. So of 3 years, we only have 3 days of what Christ did.
30 or 3?
30.
There's only 30 days in the New Testament. If you take all the history that we have about Jesus Christ in the New Testament, it amounts to 31 days, okay? And yet his ministry lasted 3 years, okay?
How many days was he in the Americas?
He was here, well, we know he was here for at least 3 days, but I don't know.
So
But this is
about
in Jerusalem. The
33.
point I'm trying to make here is that we don't have a lot of information. Whenever God called a prophet, from the time of Adam to today, they were always commanded to keep records. We don't have any of them.
Letter D.
There's an awful lot of records which have been written that we just flat don't have. We're told in the latter days that these records will come forth. Brigham Young said that in the latter days, records would be found in the earth that would prove the church is true. Okay? He said that the only responsibility of Mormons would be then to prove that we have the authority. Bottom line is, there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't have. Now, we'll talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls in a second. There's a book that I bought called the Book of Jasher. And the Book of Jasper is it's an interesting book, and I just want to talk about it for just a few minutes. And I know Jake hasn't heard this, neither is Tyler and Allie. But the Book of Jasper is quoted several times, like in the Book of Joshua, chapter 10, verse 13, it says, "Is this not written in the Book of Jasher?" In 2 Samuel, chapter 1, verse 18, it says, "Behold, it is written in the Book of Jasher." So there was a Book of Jasher. Well, we found the Book of Jasher. And this talks about the first 2,000 years, okay, which is an interesting period of time. And it starts off very much like the Bible. It reads like the Bible. It starts off with the creation and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go over that, but I'm going to get to the part that's kind of interesting. Okay. It talks a lot about Cain and Abel and how Cain killed Abel, which is not really covered. It just says Cain killed Abel. But it says here, well, it says here that the firstborn was Cain, even though we know she had children before Cain. But it says Cain was a tiller of the ground, and Abel was a keeper of sheep. Now, Abel was righteous, Cain was not. Okay, but at this time, even Christ spoke to Cain. So, Jehovah spoke to Abel and Cain and Adam and even everybody. Okay, and it says Abel brought his offering, and a fire came down from heaven and consumed it. The Lord was pleased. Cain put his offering up there, and no fire came down. And the Lord said to Cain, and it's interesting that Jehovah is speaking to Cain, and he said, I did not, your offering is inferior to me because it's inferior fruit. You did not bring the best fruit you had, and that's why I was rejected. Now this is what's kind of interesting. Okay, sometime thereafter, Cain and his brother Abel went one day into the fields to work together. They were both in the field. Cain was tilling and plowing his fields, and Abel feeding the flocks. Abel's flocks got onto Cain's freshly plowed ground, and Cain got really mad about it. Okay? I'm paraphrasing. And so Cain approached Abel in anger and said, your sheep are in my field, they're wrecking it. And then they went back and forth and back and forth. Anyway, to make a long story short, I'm just skipping a whole bunch of stuff. It has a dialogue between them. And then it said, Cain got so mad that he hastened and rose up and took the iron part of his plow, with which he suddenly smote his brother and slew him. And Cain spilled the blood of his brother Abel upon the earth. And the blood of Abel streamed upon the earth before the flocks. After this, Cain repented, having slain his brother, and he was sadly grieved, and he wept over him, and it vexed him exceedingly. And Cain rose up and dug a hole in the field where he put his brother's body, and then he put dust over it. Then, of course, Jehovah came down and confronted Cain. Cain kind of denied it. And this is the curse that Jehovah put upon Cain. He says, when thou shalt till the ground, there will be no more strength in it. For when you plant seeds, there will be thorns and thistles that shall be growing. And thou shalt be a mover and a wanderer in the earth until the day that you die.
How sad.
And then it talks about where he went. It talks about a whole bunch of stuff, but this is kind of interesting here. Well, it says, okay, so when Adam was 130 years old, he begat Seth, and Seth begat Enosh. Seth begat Enosh, okay? Now this is interesting. In the days of Enosh, the sons of men continued to rebel and transgress against God, to increase the anger of the Lord against them. And the sons of men went and they served other gods. Now this is what, the great-grandson of Adam? And they forgot the Lord who had created them in the earth. And in those days the sons of men made images of brass and iron and wood and stone, and they bowed down and served them. And the Lord caused the waters of the river Gibeon, Gibeon was one of the rivers that came out of Eden, Garden of Eden, to overflow, and he destroyed and consumed them. And he destroyed 1/3 of the inhabitants of the earth.
Wow.
Did you know that? I didn't know that. But the sons of men did not turn from their evil ways. I'm going to skip a whole bunch of stuff here. Okay, and then Enosh had a son, and he had a son, and the son that he had was a guy by the name of Canaan. And Canaan is, you know, when they talk about Canaan, the land where Abraham went, was named after this Canaan right here. And it says, Canaan grew up, and he was 40 years old, and he became very wise and had knowledge and skill and all wisdom. And he reigned over all the sons of men. And he had the sons of men, he had great wisdom and knowledge. He was a very wise man, and he had power to rule with wisdom, and he had power over spirits and over demons. And in those days, Canaan wrote upon tablets of stone all that had taken place, and also what was going to happen in the future, and he put them in his treasury. Well, we don't have those records. All right? Now, this is kind of interesting. It talks about a lot of stuff. I'm going to skip it, but this I think is interesting. Then we'll get to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay? This is the kind of stuff they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay? And some of the sons of men, these are men that kind of followed the ways of the world rather than the ways of God, they had polygamy in those days. They had several wives. Some of the sons of men caused their wives to drink a draught that would render them barren, in order that they might retain their figure and their beauty, beautiful appearance.
So they wouldn't have children?
No.
So read that again. Some of the sons of men caused their wives to drink a draught that would render them barren, in order that they might retain their figures, and whereby their beautiful appearance might not fade.
Haven't they ever heard of exercise? Come on, guys.
And the childbearing women appeared abominable in the sight of their husbands,
You're kidding.
Sorry,
while their husbands lived for the barren ones, and that's who they were attached to.
Oh, that's
Well,
so sad.
Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting. I've never heard that.
I know it. So this is what's cool about Jasher. It's the same history, but it just kind of tells a few more things.
Well, why do we have this book and where did it go?
Yeah, where'd it come
This
from?
is part of the Apocrypha.
Well,
Okay, it was taken out.
Well, they just didn't have it for some reason. They couldn't find it when they put the Bible together. One of these days we'll have a lesson on how the Bible was accumulated. It's very, very interesting.
And also,
Okay.
in the last 50 years, they've found a bunch of new texts. The Nag
Oh yeah,
Hammadi
they
and
found a lot.
Dead
Now
Sea
we're going to
Scrolls.
talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, but
Okay.
this is kind of one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay.
Yeah.
The Bible was put together in like 300 years after the birth of Christ. Okay, it was put together by primarily by Saint Jerome, and they just kind of said, well, this book looks good, this book looks good, let's not do this one, let's do this one. And what we have is what they decided on, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you two stories, and I'm going to bring the stories together. Okay, the first story happened in the year 1947. Okay, Israel was still under the rule of Britain, okay? And,
What year is this? Sorry.
pardon? Israel was still under the rule of Britain, okay? They had not been free. The Second World War was over. A lot of the Jews were coming into Israel. The United Nations had voted that Israel would be a separate country, but a very, very small one, not including Jerusalem, okay? And the Britain was kind of in charge. They kind of controlled it. They were a colonial power. And the Arabs who lived there didn't want Israel to have land. And so what they were doing, they were preparing for war. So when Britain left, they would drive the Israelis out. Well, there was a young man by the name of Mohammed Adibun. He was a Bedouin. And he was out smuggling arms under the belly of a donkey. And he was just going across the Dead Seas, you know, and like kids do. He was throwing rocks, you know, as he was going. And he threw this, and he was doing these arms. He threw this rock up into a big cave, and he heard something break. And he went up into this cave, and he saw a whole bunch of jars. They were jars with kind of linen and tar on them. And in these jars were scrolls. So he took these scrolls, took them back to his tent, and they sat in his tent for a couple of years because the war broke out between Israel and the Arabs, and so he couldn't do anything with them. So they sat in his tent for a couple of years in kind of wet burlap, if you would. Well, after the war was over, this boy thought, well, you know, I'm going to see if these are worth something. So he took them to his bishop, not a Mormon bishop, but a bishop of his church. The oldest Christian church in the world is in Jerusalem. And he took them and he said, I found these scrolls on the Dead Sea. Well, this bishop was pretty smart because he knew nobody had lived on the Dead Sea back until the time of Vespucian, when the Romans drove the Israelis out. So he knew these scrolls were of great antiquity. And if you're not with me, stop me, okay? And so the bishop said, I'll tell you what, I'll see if I can sell them for you, and I'll share what I have. And so he sold them, and he sold them to someone, and he gave the Bedouin boy some money. And these scrolls later sold for $250,000, okay? And they actually built a museum in Israel called the Museum of the Scroll, and these are put there. It was paid for by a Jewish man in New York. By the way, there's more Jews in New York than there is in Israel. Okay. Anyway, to make a long story short, the Bedouins all of a sudden realized that there was good money to be made. So they went into these caves and began to bring these 2,000-year-old relics out, okay? And they would take them and they would tear them into little pieces. You believe that? And they would sell them. Well, of course, the archaeologist says, no, don't do that. We will pay you by the square inch. The bigger the piece, the more you'll get. And so there was virtually a traffic. Well, to make a long story short, they have found over 10,000 jars. They have found them on the Dead Sea. They have found them in Turkestan. They found them in Egypt. They found them in Nagamati. They found them just all over 10,000 scrolls, all of them written before Christ.
Or shortly after Christ.
Well, shortly, from 100 AD to 200 BC.
Yeah.
They have found, okay, now, one of the things when I give this lecture, I usually start off by doing this, and I haven't done it. I get a blackboard up here, have everybody come up and write some very unique belief of Mormons. Really quickly, just toss some out. Unique belief of Mormons.
Plural marriage.
Deification.
Plural marriage, okay.
Exaltation.
What?
Exaltation.
Exaltation.
Baptism for the dead.
Yeah.
Tithing.
Yeah. Well.
DS 10%.
Hall of Mirrors, temple marriage, Mother in Heaven.
Sealings.
Christ was married.
Okay, it goes on and on and on and on. Okay, the point is, we list a whole bunch of them, then I say, every single unique doctrine that we've listed here has been found in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Which is astonishing.
Every single one. And as a matter of fact, they have found every book in the Bible except the book of Esther. And they found a whole bunch others. This is one of the books they found, a book of Jasher.
And the important thing, just to drive the point home, is that because the Bible was tinkered up those first couple hundred years, and that these were original ones that go way back, so they're older.
Yeah, that was what's cool about it.
So you could.
And what happened was,
what was
this was just heralded. It was in our lifetime. They found these. It was just heralded, the greatest archaeological discovery in the history of the world. And all the churches just ran to it, and then they kind of backed off because they found that the doctrines that they found in these things didn't correspond to what they taught.
And so they didn't use them.
And a lot of really high members of the Catholic Church left the church because they realized the church wouldn't correspond to what these findings were. And like the Catholic Church has actually made 110 encyclicals, which is a change of doctrine to correspond with these. We'll talk about the doctrines in a second. That's
Also,
one story.
BYU also had a great hand in
Yeah.
preserving and making it possible to translate some of these fragile scrolls.
Yeah, but what's interesting, most of this was done by non-Mormons. And that's because
I've
these are
been
things
to where
non-Mormons
those
could
caves
do
are.
to help us.
So
Okay,
they,
now-
those
wouldn't,
caves?
they didn't want to
Have you been
publish
in
them
those
because
caves?
it didn't correlate
We didn't go
with
in the
what
cave,
Bible
but
was
we went and
saying.
saw them.
Yeah.
You can't really get up there. It's like
Now,
but
I'm
you
going to tell you another story.
But
This
it's
is
all
another
says
story.
the Mormon doctrine.
This story happened 180 years before Christ was born. And it happened, and it's recorded in the scriptures.
Yeah, she said that Tan and I went to the. Did you go to the museum? Scroll.
I've never been there.
Yeah, I went to the museum too.
Dad's never been to Israel.
You know what? It's a giant. It's a giant building, but it's shaped like a jar. It's called the
really?
Shrine of the Scroll or something, and it's shaped like a big jar. So you walk in the jar, and they have all these scrolls on the wall.
I remember that.
Okay, well, I'm actually looking at my notes here, and I should have done it. They've actually found over 100,000 scrolls.
Wow.
They found 100,000 in Turkestan. They found 20,000 dated in the 1st or 2nd century. Okay, now this is the second story that I want to tell you. The
And
totally
there are
separate
probably more
story.
that haven't been found.
Pardon?
There are probably others that have not been found.
Oh yeah,
Just all
Okay.
those countries that surround the dead.
yeah. These are all the.
In the Holy Land, like
when the
Egypt.
Jews were driven out of Jerusalem,
Yeah.
they went to Turkey, they went to Turkestan, they went to Iran,
Okay.
and that's where they fled. And they took these scrolls and they buried them. Now this is another story. This story happened 180 years before Christ. And this story is found in the Aaronic Priesthood Through the Ages, which is a Aaronic Priesthood manual back when I was a kid, okay? It started, there was the head, okay, back in those days they had a high priest of the church. The high priest was like the prophet. And the high priest of the church was a man by the name of Onus III, okay? And they were conquered by the Syrians, and there was a boy king of Syria, and he did not like the Jews. And so what he did, a man by the name of Menelaus came up to the boy king of Syria, who was the king of Syria, and says, "I'm going to give you 500 shekels of silver. You make me the high priest." It's like Oral Roberts coming to like Obama conquers U.S. and he's in control of the Mormon Church. And so Oral Roberts comes to Obama and says, "I'm going to give you $5 million. Make me the prophet of the Mormon Church." And Obama doesn't care, so he makes him the prophet. Well, this is what happened here. The church went into a state of apostasy. Okay. Interesting enough, a little bit later on, somebody came and offered him 800 shekels of silver, and to replace Menelaus. Okay, at this time, a group of faithful saints left Jerusalem and went to the Dead Sea. Okay, and they were led by a man by the name of Assis, A-S-S-I-S. And it says, according to their records, that Assis spoke face to face with God and was regarded much like we regard Joseph Smith. The community grew to 5,000 men, women, and children. Okay? Now, David O. McKay said, and this was a group that was very active and very religious on the Dead Sea. And a lot of people think that that's where John the Baptist went to be trained, because it was basically true. Because the rightful high priest was living in the Dead Sea at that time. Interestingly enough, had this apostasy not taken place, do you know who the rightful high priest would have been from Onus III all the way down? It would have been John. It would have been
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist. But because of this apostasy, he wasn't. But John the Baptist went and lived in a city called Qumran, which is on the Dead Sea, and a lot of people think Christ went there as well. David O. McKay says that the book of Hebrews was written to the people in Qumran. Okay, now, what's interesting is when they found Qumran, they found this fabulous archaeological site there, and they thought it was a monastery. But they started digging it up, and they found out, wait a minute, there's women's bones here, and there's children's bones. Couldn't be a monastery. Well, what had happened is these people, when the church went into a state of apostasy, left where they were, and they went to the Dead Sea, and they tried to keep their religion. Okay? Later on, 2,000 years later, the Bedouin tribe, the Bedouins of the Tamara tribe, found the remains of these people. And that was the origin of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, now we have the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, what's interesting about the Dead Sea Scrolls is virtually every single unique doctrine that we believe in our church has been found in the Dead Sea. I'm going to read some of them to you. Okay, every book in the Old Testament has been found except the book of Esther, and 400 books that we've never heard of.
Just those.
Every book's been found except for 400.
Yeah, since Qumran, they found over 300
There's
caves.
supposed to be a comma there.
Some of them in Egypt, some in
They
Iran.
found 400
400 that we
extra
haven't heard of,
books
but
that they
okay.
hadn't heard of that aren't in the Bible.
All right, now here's what's kind of cool about this.
Tons of books. Nobody
Is
knows.
in Qumran, 100 years before Christ, they have found a baptismal font. And I've got pictures of it.
Wow.
Well, this just blew the Christians' mind because they said Christ instituted baptism. But here these people in Qumran were baptizing 100 years before Christ.
And there's a thing in the Jewish thing. It's
Does that
called-
bother us?
Nope.
No, because we believe Adam was baptized.
Yeah.
But it's brought as the Catholics.
Yeah.
And you know, it's kind of funny when John the Baptist was baptizing, the Jewish, they didn't care. They didn't think much about it because they knew about it, okay? That was, okay.
What were you saying about?
Oh, the Jews even today have a thing called a mikvah bath. I saw a picture online. It looks just like an LDS temple baptismal font. It's a square little tub, and they go down and they wash.
Before they go to the temple.
It's a ritual Jewish thing. It goes way back to like before Christ,
Wow.
and they preserved it. Even the really Orthodox Jews now they take these mikvah baths, which is pretty much just a baptism.
Okay, what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to read, I've got a whole bunch of stuff, I won't read it all of it to you, but I'm just going to read you some quotes. These are quotes from the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay? All right, quote unquote. In the community of Qumran, in the community there shall be a council of 12 and 3 priests that are perfect in all things. Okay, speaks of a bishop. Only the sons of Aaron shall have authority. Well, that's not new. Okay.
And this is from the
About
Dead Sea
Baptist,
Scrolls, right?
this is the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay.
This was written 200 years before Christ. And they have a council of 12 and 3 high priests that preside. Now, this is, again, it's 200 years, look at this, Anne, 200 years BC, all right? Did I read that right? Okay. Dr. Black said they had baptism in Qumran by total immersion. But that was only administered after repentance.
Wow.
200 years before Christ, okay? This doctrine does bother some, like the Unitarians, because they believe Jesus took the idea from Christianity. Wait a minute. But this is a bombshell to Catholics and Jews. Okay, here's another one. In Nagamani, which is in Egypt, here again, this is 200 years before Christ, a man named Thomas, actually this is not true. This is in Nagamani, this was after Christ. A man named Thomas spread a linen cloth on a table, baptized a famous woman. The baptismal prayer is the same as Arwa said, after which they took the bread and they broke it, and they took a cup of water and blessed it.
Wow.
And they say, the cup of the Son and the Father, and you've received the seal, create for yourself eternal life, and a voice from heaven said, Amen. Then I have a note here. The legend is this woman was, I don't have the name. There was a really famous woman, okay? Okay,
Thatcher.
sacrament. They talk about, well,
Here's all that.
you know, breaking bread and water. Does that bother us? Bothers people that are Christians because Christ instituted this. But we believe Melchizedek did. I'm skipping a lot of stuff. Okay, eternal family life. This is good. Okay, here it says, okay. I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff here. It says, you shall bear children and bear seed with all everlasting blessings and eternal rejoicing with the victorious life of eternity. In other words, we're talking about bearing children in the hereafter.
Wait, read that again.
It's kind of awkward. All those who walk by the Spirit, consisting of healing and abundant peace, and then if you abide by the covenant, what a covenant, the temple covenants, you shall bear children eternally.
Oh wow,
Wow.
that's revolutionary. I'm surprised that isn't that one.
That's the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, here's another one.
I need to get a book on those. Did Hugh Nibley do some stuff on that? That would be good to read.
Okay, God chose them not from the beginning of the world, but before. God chose his people before the world was. In each epoch of time, he raised up men to lead them. What if you don't abide the covenant? Damnation, because you have no survivors. In other words, what is damnation in the hereafter?
No family.
Not be able to have survivors. In the Gospel of the Egyptians, it talks about a heavenly mother. Interesting. Is that Mormon doctrine or not? Nothing was done in their church without common consent. Does that sound like us?
Wow.
Wow, that's Zion.
In the last days, the sons of Aaron, the sons of Moses, and the sons of Aaron shall offer a sacrifice of blood and fat. The priest officiate with an instrument called the Urim and Thummim.
What?
That's what it says here.
What?
Wait, what?
It tells of a Joseph.
Wait, go back to that one.
Well, that's in the Bible. It talks about the Urim and Thummim, isn't it? In the Old Testament, the high priest had the breastplate with the stones
I
and
don't
the.
remember that.
I think that is in the Bible.
and the
Is that
bow.
the Bible?
It says here, each one who goes on to glory in the hereafter will have great thrones and kingdoms. Okay, this is interesting. After death, it says souls will be ascending through a series of gates to heaven, and there was a succession of putting on and off of garments. Angels of God sat at various gates and asked things and ask you about your new name.
That's. I mean, if you read that to someone who's not LDS,
They wouldn't understand.
They wouldn't get it.
But do we understand it? Okay.
No
this
wonder
is-
they backed away from it all. Why doesn't the church pursue this more?
Here's a story. Tells a
Do the
story about
Masons- do
a
the
young man
Masons
who was a
have any
Levite who felt he was
No.
damned
Yes.
because he got drunk and revealed his new name.
Wait,
What?
say that again.
One more time.
Okay, it tells a story about a guy, about a young man who was a Levite, who's has a priesthood, who felt he was damned because he got drunk and revealed a new name.
Was
It
he?
speaks of washing anointings. It speaks of rooms with endless mirrors where families are sealed up for all eternity.
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I
now
don't
this.
we have like a book that.
Did they have
church and
mirrors in
stuff
those
with all
days?
these things.
Pardon?
I'm sorry, I haven't seen.
Now I'm going to read. Now this is a direct quote. A direct quote from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And Allie, all you guys would think I'm going to be, I'm breaking my covenants because I'm going to give you the temple ceremony right here. But this is a direct quote. This is what you're going to hear when you go to the temple, Allie. Okay, this is a direct quote. Arise, Adam, and when he saw her, he said, "It is you who have given me life, and shall be called the mother of the living." Then came in the serpent. What has he told you? Of every tree which is in paradise you shall eat, but from the tree of good and evil do not eat. And not only did he say, "Do not eat," but "Do not touch, for in the day that thou shalt eat from it you shall surely die." And the serpent said, "You shall not surely die, for he has said this unto you, for he is jealous for you, because you should become like gods, knowing good from evil." The woman took from the tree and ate and gave to her husband, after which they were ashamed. They were denuded of the spirit, and they took fig leaves and bound them around their loins. "Adam, where are you?" Adam says, "I heard your voice and I hid myself because I was naked." "Why have you hid yourself? You have eaten from the tree. Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat of?" Adam said, "The woman now gave us to me. She gave me and I did eat."
Wait a minute.
And Eve said, "The serpent deceived me and I
That's in
did
the
eat."
Book of Moses too, isn't
Yeah.
Then they went to the serpent and cursed it, and from that day forth the serpent came under the powers until the day that the perfect man should come. They then cast Adam out of paradise with his wife, no blessings with them because they were under the curse. Men were cast into great toils of life, and men. This was written 100 years after Christ. Do you recognize this? That's the temple ceremony, part of it.
Isn't that's in the Pearl of Price though too, isn't it?
Have you heard some
Yeah.
of those? I don't know if it's the Apocrypha one, but it talks about how Jesus and his disciples would dress in white robes and do like ceremonies.
I don't know about that.
You know, it's not in the New Testament, but it's in some research they found that from the early Christianities, they have actual evidence now that there was special clothing that the 12 wore.
Interesting.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know where that was, but I gotta find that.
In the Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Philip has some really cool stuff. He says, "The woman is united to the husband in the bridal chamber, and those united shall no longer be separated in the hereafter." Okay, he talks about it. And he gave Abraham the garment of skin made by God for Adam and Eve. Melchizedek gave Abraham the garment of skins that was made for God and for Adam and Eve. In the Mandean text, it speaks of the temple and the rite of baptism for the dead that was only carried out in temples. Now remember, guys, this is 100 years after Christ and 200 years before Christ. Other churches, they say, "Huh? Doesn't bother us a bit, does it?" There was an LDS scholar by the name of Dr. Greer, and he was working for a man who had spent 3 months translating a single page and finally figured it out. He gave it to Greer, who was LDS, and told him to see what he could do with it, and he translated it overnight. And the guy says, "How did you do it so fast?" He says, "I'm familiar with it, because it was part of the temple ceremony." Okay, this is cool. A 2nd century document, this is 200 years after Christ, speaks of a man who will come forth in the last days, restore the truth, who will have the Holy Ghost with him from his birth. He will restore the priesthood to the earth, restore God's favor to the Jews, gather the elect from all nations, and then will be killed by lawless men. His blood will cry for vengeance from the ground, and his name will be called Joseph, and this Joseph will be from Ephraim, and he will be the son of Joseph.
Oh my word.
And that's,
Who said
that's
that?
in the
Where's
Dead
that
Sea
from?
Scrolls.
This
That's
is
in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
2nd century document,
Read it again.
200 years after Christ.
Read that again.
Wow.
That's huge.
What was Joseph Smith's name? Okay, I love. This is one of my favorites, right? A couple that are favorites. This is one of them. Okay, this is again from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Then I got a little note here. I'm supposed to tell a joke right now. I'm a believer that you have to tell a funny every 5 or 10 minutes, or you lose them. You want my
Just
joke?
the fact that you have that written.
It's
is
good
funny.
news, bad news. Good news is you're going to heaven. Bad news is you're going to die. I've given this talk probably 20 times. I was a very popular youth speaker in Southern California. I was, all the time I was going on assignments. But I have a whole bunch of jokes in here, but that was one. I was supposed to tell it at this point. All right. Okay. But this is good. Now listen to this. I love this. Okay. This is a quote. I'm a direct quote. In the night when the Lord's day was dawning, Sunday, and the soldiers were on guard 2 by 2, there was a great voice in heaven, and they saw the heavens open, and 2 men came down in great light and drew near the tomb. And the stone which had been placed in front of the tomb rolled forth of its own accord, and both young men entered the tomb. Then 3 men came out of the tomb, the 2 supporting the third, and they heard a voice from heaven saying, "Have you preached to those spirits that sleep?" The response was, "Yes."
Wow.
Wow, isn't that good?
That's
Whoa.
cool. What's the source on that? Where did that one come from?
Pardon? It was just one of the documents, in one of the documents of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Here, one of the documents tells how they prepared the Lord's body for burial, talks how they pulled the nails out of his hands, how they washed him and had wrapped him.
Wow.
Speaks of 3 men in the Godhead. Okay, another book says 3 men came to Adam and told Adam, they that have... And Adam said, and it says, they had more glory than that other man who keeps appearing to him. Who is the other man? Well, he's the same. Speaks of Adam being baptized. What happened to Qumran? Luke speaks of the priests joining the church. What priests? The ones who crucified Christ? No, it was probably the priests in Qumran. I'm skipping a lot of stuff here.
Boy, that's pretty close to home.
Why doesn't our church?
The village of Qumran left about 35 BC, went north to Damascus.
I think one of the problems is that mainstream Christianity has shunned these books and marginalized them because they're wacko, because they isn't that what they said? Is a lot of them are just kind of like not. I think the word apocrypha has a bad connotation for Christians.
Okay.
Probably because they found this stuff in there
That's probably
and they couldn't reconcile what it meant.
Okay, time's getting late, so I'll just do about 5 or 6 more here. The documents speak of a New Jerusalem. Now this mystifies, the Christians and the Jews. The New Jerusalem. What's the New Jerusalem? It speaks of a grand temple to be built there with 12 gates, high walls, and 3 inner courts. If any of you have read the description of the New Jerusalem, that's what it has. Has 12 gates, has high walls, has 3 inner courts. Joseph was criticized for naming that prophet Alma, which means fostering mother. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found a document transferring title of property to a man by the name of Alma, son of Alma, son of Judah.
Wow.
In the Gospel of the Egyptians, it speaks of a doctrine of a heavenly mother. Now this is cool. This is really cool. This is one of the cool ones. When there was a rebellion in heaven, the mothers wept for their children, and the brothers came and laid their hands on the heads of their mothers to console her.
Wow.
Wait, read that again. What
Isn't that
happened?
cool?
They give them
Okay, in the
blessings.
Gospel of the Egyptians, which is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it speaks of the doctrine of a heavenly mother. Then it says, when there was a rebellion in heaven, the mother weeps for her children, and the brothers came and laid their hands on the head of their mother to console her.
Wow.
Mother in heaven?
Blessings.
Your friend Marcy. One of these days I'll tell you the story that I had. I had a vision about mom and her mom. Okay. The 76th section talks about the heavens wept. Who wept? Well, the mother wept. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Would Marcy weep if she lost her children? Okay, talks about, this is a doctrine, 140 AD. Only in marriage is the soul complete. The Gospel of Philip says, the woman is united to the husband in the bridal chamber, and those there united shall no longer be separated.
You mean, like,
Holly likes that one.
here's
Say
the
that one
thing.
more time.
Even if
They're united in the bridal chamber and
Oh, yeah.
never separated.
even if we had a handful of these, it'd be remarkable. But this is bullseye after bullseye. I mean, how do you explain that? There is no way to explain that away. You cannot.
Well, how they
Reasonably
discredit
make
it. They
it-
say it wasn't real or
Well, but how is
No,
it
but
possible
how did
that
Joseph
they
Smith
have
get
the
it?
same thing and we have the
Because
same thing?
even if they marginalize what the text was, the fact that it was buried in Egypt in 200 BC,
Right.
how did a farm boy in 1830?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there is
Yeah,
no
this didn't
way to
come out till after-
reconcile.
This
It's
didn't
too.
come out in 1947.
Yeah, I mean, like that alone ought to be evidence right there.
Exactly. Okay, just
A lot of people
two or three more,
understand,
okay?
even people
They
in
found a
Catholic
copper
schools.
scroll.
Well, because they don't. Most people don't know about this. That's why.
They found, well, they do. There's a lot of people that know about it, and they left their churches because of it. What they do is they know about it, and they just kind of disregard it.
Why does not our church like publish these or
Wouldn't-
like make them
convert-
part of church?
Wouldn't convert people. Like I've always wondered why in the hereafter, in the millennium, there will still be other churches other than the Mormons, because even there you have free agency and you have to have the humility to get the Spirit to bear testimony. There will be Brandon's church is still going to be going strong in the millennium, and he'll be a good guy there. Okay, they found the copper scrolls 8 feet long. It lists the inventory of the temple. It was over $2 billion worth. This treasury has still not been found. Okay, this is the last one I'm going to give you. This is good. This is good. Say that one of the best to last. Okay, this talks about Moses. You know, the Mormons taught that Moses was translated. Everybody else believes he died. Why was Moses translated?
He needed his body to be able to come back and deliver the keys
And he couldn't do it
if he was dead.
if he was dead. He came back to Peter, James, and John, and he couldn't have done it. Likewise, Elijah was translated. Okay, all right. Moses said, "The Lord prepared me from the foundations of the world to be the mediator of the covenant." Moses' pre-existence is not found anywhere else except in the Mormons. Now, this is what's cool. Well, the next thing is cool. This is kind of cool. Special qualifications of a prophet like Moses is to know God face to face. That Mormon doctrine? Yeah. Well, I didn't know this till after I left, but I was in a town called Dover-Foxcroft. There was no members, zero. We had to go 50 miles to Bangor to church, and we couldn't get people to go 50 miles.
50 miles.
Some of those guys never gone 50 miles in their life.
Sure.
And but I remember that in the church that in this town I was in, it was that's where I baptized Sister Atherton, which is the person who
It's not dress up.
was related to your friend.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Everybody's gonna be here this week for Halloween.
they had a Methodist minister there that just really didn't like us, and he had it one day in his service. He talked about the Mormons. It was all publicized. We're going to tell you the truth about the Mormons, and we showed up at his church, and we sat there in the middle pew, and everybody just glared at us. You know, he got up in front of the crowd and he says, "We're going to talk about the Mormons today," and he says, "And there's two of them with us. There's two of them are with us today." And he glared at us, and they passed the plate around. We didn't put any money in, and later on, one of the people we were teaching said, "Boy, they're mad at you." They came and says, "They didn't even put money in the plate." And but later on that, and then as we went out the door, he was at the door shaking everybody's hands, and we walked out the door, and I remember smiling and says, "That was very interesting. Don't agree with you, very interested." And he just kind of scowled at us. But later on, he called the other ministers together in town, and he wanted to drive us out, you know, physically force us out of town. And the Baptist minister stopped him from doing it. And ironically, the only person we baptized was from the Baptist church, Sister Atherton. And also that guy that went on a mission to, you know,
Where did you serve again?
New England.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting.
And it turned out that Sarah's roommate in college had her family come into the church directly from Sister Atherton. Her
Oh, no
dad
way.
Well, it's an interesting story. What it was is Sarah brought home her roommate, and she says, "I'm from Maine," and I says, "Well, tell me where you are from, Maine." She says, "Oh, you wouldn't know. Let's try me." And she says, well, you wouldn't know. I said, well, just give it a try. Been to Maine. She says, I'm from Dover, Foxcroft. And I says, I know where Dover, Foxcroft. That's where I started my mission, the very first time I was in. We started talking a little bit, and she wrote back to her mother, and come to find out that I converted a lady, which ultimately converted other people, which there was a whole group of people that were converted because of this one lady.
That's so great.
And when I converted Sister Atherton, when the Lord converted her and I helped, I thought, man, this is just an old lady.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to come of this. And kind of find out there's a whole branch back there that kind of comes from
That's so
This-
cool.
Sister
Did you
Atherton.
serve down in
That's
Massachusetts at all?
Yeah, I did.
My MTC companion, her, the kind of it's a cool story. Her neighbor was baptized, who then taught introduced the gospel to her family. The missionary who baptized her was another elder that served in Bulgaria. So like the two, like the son of the missionary that converted her family and her were in the same mission. So it's
Never
kind of
know,
cool
do ya?
to see
Oh,
that.
that's cool.
I thought I'd wasted my life just converting this old lady.
Well, the best missionary story for Dad.
Tyler,
I got tissue in my brain up here.
rule is when you get on your sleeve. You know, that's the rules when you cough on your sleeve.
Yeah.
One of the best missionary stories for Dad was that when he proposed to me, I had a missionary, and he had another girl who thought he was going to marry her, and I don't even know how many others thought they were going to marry them, but I know at least one other one. And we both wrote to our missionaries and told them that we were breaking it off because we'd met LeRoy Brown when we were getting married, and they were in the same mission district. And they both got Dear John letters from the same.
No way! Oh my goodness, that's fantastic.
What are the odds of that?
Where were they?
England.
Oh my gosh.
That's hilarious. I didn't know that.
Did they get married? That'd be even funnier.
No, because
The two of them.
no, two girls wrote to two different
girls.
missionaries saying that they were
They were
marrying Roy
both
Brown.
marrying Roy Brown.
And the two missionaries they wrote to were in the same mission.
You know, Margaret Black wrote a letter
funny.
to her missionary.
But what are the odds of you in the same mission? at the same time?
I know.
No.
What must your missionary have thought?
Got a lot of missionaries have a rough mission, Dad.
I did them a
I remember
favor.
we had
They got women out of their minds so they could concentrate on working.
There was an elder that lived in with me.
That was a funny
who
sneak.
he like
Those were funny sneezes
his girlfriend
that Tyler
wrote him a
did.
Dear
Can
John.
you give me a napkin
and
and
he's
put it on my
he's
computer?
like,